Please come to order. Good morning. Welcome to the Commissioner of St. Mary's County meeting this date, Tuesday, July 13th, 2021. I am Randy Guy, President of the Commissioner of St. Mary's County. I'd like to introduce the other commissioners. Sitting to my right, representing the 1st Commissioner District, which includes Bridge, Piney Point, St. George's Island, Mr. Eric Colvin.
Morning.
Mike Hewitt, who represents Leonardtown and Hollywood, the 2nd Commissioner District.
Good morning.
Sitting to my left, representing the 3rd Commissioner District, which includes Charlotte Hall, 7th District, Golden Beach, and Mechanicsville, Mr. John O'Connor.
Good morning.
Representing the 4th Commissioner District, which includes Lexington Park, some of California, Great Mills, and some of Hollywood, Mr. Todd Morgan. David Weiskopf, our County Attorney and Acting County Administrator, is sitting at the table to my left. Elisa Cassis, our Communications Director, is sitting at the table to my right.
Morning.
Amy Carter, our Video Media Producer, is behind the glass. Please turn your cell phones off or on vibrate. Tonight at 6:30 p.m., we will hold a public hearing on the proposed LoSAP 2021 benefit change, followed by our public forum at 6:45. Please stand at this time for the invocation and pledge. Dear Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this gathering of commissioners and our citizens to do the right thing for the people and for St. Mary's County. Please guide us and give us hope. We also like to give you a blessing for Mr. Joe Tom Wright, who worked at Parks and Rec at the golf course, who passed away last week. Please bless him and bring him into your fold. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good. Thank you all. Now we need the approval of the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
First and second, all in favor? Aye. Any nays? Ayes have it. Next, we have a proclamation for National Park and Recreation Month. And I think Mr. Art Shepard, our Director of Parks and Recs, is here, and plus a lot of his staff is here. Thank you all for being here today. This proclamation is being accepted by Art, whereas the good health and well-being of all citizens of St. Mary's County is enhanced by a strong commitment to valuable park and recreation programs throughout the county, and whereas realizing the value of park and recreation programs, which encourage physical activity, improve the physical and spiritual health of county residents, instill an appreciation for the environment, facilitate the improvement of family relations, and encourage the pursuit of a balanced and healthy lifestyle. And whereas the county makes available facilities and opportunities to all its citizens through the Department of Recreation and Parks, including parks, museums, a golf course, recreation centers, public landings and boat ramps, athletic facilities, and youth and adult programs and activities. And whereas the county acknowledges and commends county staff, volunteers, youth sports leagues, and community groups in their joint efforts to provide successful programs. And whereas St. Mary's County celebrates the efforts of the National Recreation and Park Association and the Maryland Recreation and Park Association and joins in applauding the successful parks and recreation programs which have had a positive and productive impact on the lives and experiences of the citizens of St. Mary's County throughout the year. Now, therefore, we, the Commissioner of St. Mary's County, do hereby proclaim the month of July 2021 National Park and Recreation Month in St. Mary's County and invite all citizens to visit their local parks and recreational facilities and discover what they have to offer. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Art, and your staff. Thank you all for showing up for this.
May I?
Yes, you may. You got it.
I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you, the investment you've made, along with the citizens, in the park improvements and the master planning and the water access in these last several years. It's been phenomenal. Also want to tell you how grateful we are for the role we play, though, in recreation parks and the quality of life. The environment, water access, positive youth development programming, school-age care, historical preservation, just so many ways that we're involved in the lives of the citizen, making it better, and we're proud of that. But we're real proud of the fact that we have 6 recreation facilities, 4 museum sites, a golf course, 21 parks, 15 public landings, working with our youth sports leagues at over 90 ball fields, just finished turf projects, all during a COVID year, in which I'm also proud of this staff here, what they did to keep the pool open. They kept the gymnastics center running, the waterfront parks, throughout the parks, our leagues playing ball, the CIP project. So proud of our group, and that's why here in a second I want them to stand with me as we take our picture together. A great year, a great time, and then one of the other things is I see Judge Stamm here in the past year, working with him, jury selection, working with him and partnering with the circuit court there, not only with the old jail museum, but with jury selections right here at Leonard Hall Recreation Center. Our staff is flexible, and they get it done, and I'm delighted with my role with the Recreation Parks Department, and thank you very much, all of you.
You've done a great job, Mr. Art Shepard, and we appreciate all you've done for us
Thank you.
and the county.
Can I get them up?
Yes.
Mr. Patrick Dugan, our manager at the golf course, couldn't be with us. Things got busy there all of a sudden. Commissioner Joe? Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Great. Thank you all very much.
We have something else to say today. Oh. And that is the big guy here on the right, the red shirt on. That'd be him right here. It's his birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Tyrone. Happy birthday to you.
We went to high school together. I was a sophomore, he was okay. 95's not working.
Well, next thing, we're going to go right into county administrator time. Mr. David Weiskopf, our acting county administrator, will lead the way.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yes, sir.
President Guy. The first thing we have is the draft agenda for July 20th. At 9 o'clock, we have the invocation and pledge by Commissioner Colvin, the approval of consent agenda. At 9:05 is the proclamation of the 31st anniversary of Americans with Disabilities Act. 9:10 is county administrator time. 10:20 is commissioner time. And then at 10:30, we have closed session for real property and litigation. And then you would adjourn. And on Tuesday, July 27th, at 9 o'clock, you have the invocation and pledge by Commissioner Hewitt with approval of consent agenda, a commendation for Jack Curtis retirement. At 9:10, Department of Emergency Services presentation for the EOC partners. 9:30, Department of Human Resources for the decision for the LoSAP 2021 benefit change. 9:40 is county administrator time. 10:45 is commissioner time. Adjourn, and then at 2:30 is the annual Maryland Association of Counties annual brief. And then you would adjourn.
Okay.
And then next, for this morning's business meeting, you begin with Circuit Court with Judge Stamm and staff, Lori Tabor Finch, and, Karen Bruce, for the cooperative reimbursement agreement for Circuit Court child support enforcement.
Good morning.
Good morning, Judge.
Well, let me start off by telling you that I wanted to thank Art personally, because Art doesn't like getting compliments, frankly, is that we were able to do jury trials last fall during a short window before we shut down on jury trials again because of the pandemic, then started up again roughly 3 months ago based on using the drill hall in order to socially distance to bring in the 100-plus people we need to pick a jury. And without the flexibility and the involvement of Parks and Rec, we wouldn't have been able to do that.
That's great. I'm glad we were able to help.
Could have been in Baltimore County going to the cattle building at their county
At the
fair.
county fair.
They actually call it the cow building. Cow Palace is what they call
Well,
it.
it probably got done faster that way, didn't it?
Well, I've been told that it's very smelly there, but anyway. They've been wonderful to work with. We're here today, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. A cooperative reimbursement agreement. Now, that's gone through the Maryland Department of Human Resource, but however, it is actually a federal grant that is operated through the state. This amount is fairly small when it comes to grants, for the grants that we're involved in. It's $13,675. of which the county's match would be $4,650. The rest, the $9,025 plus or minus, is actually done by the feds. And what it does, it pays for 10% of the magistrate's legal assistance and the bailiff's salaries during the process of child enforcement. Because of the agreement, we're able to go after deadbeat dads, and it gives us more resources in order to fulfill that obligation. So my request is that you go ahead and to accept this grant.
I move to approve the application for the cooperative reimbursement agreement for 1-year period from the Maryland Department of Human Resources on behalf of the Circuit Court for child support enforcement in the amount of $13,675 for FY 2022, and authorize the Commissioner President to execute the related documents.
Second discussion. Judge Stown,
Yes, sir.
when I was in small business, and thank God I'm not in it now because I'm hearing this, small business people are having a terrible time. There was many times when people came to work for me who were great technicians or great counter service reps, and within 30 days, here comes a letter from the circuit court saying, by the way, and it was child support that was due.
It was.
And what the issue got to be was these people couldn't live on what they were making once they paid their child support. Now, look, I'm all in favor. Once you have to be accountable for whatever you bring into this world.
Let me just say this, is that the guidelines for child support are based on a formula that's done by the legislature.
Okay.
And that is based on the income of the individual, the income of the custodial parent. It is then on a formula that says how many children that you have. You have different things that can be deducted from it. For example, if you're paying child support with other families, that is subtracted from whatever the most modern one and newest one is. So what happens often with the ones that you get those letters from is that not that they're establishing child support, is that they're in arrearage of those child support.
Oh, no, I understand.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. But what would happen would be this person say, look, I can work under the table, which nobody
Oh, I
wants.
know.
And no, look, I get it.
Oh.
But, it's just a reality of what we're dealing with out here. And the next thing gets to be, they leave because they can't afford to, they go to Florida. I don't know, they go out of state. And they run. But my point is has there ever been any thought about trying to recreate that whole idea where you don't end up with so many, whether it be deadbeat moms or deadbeat dads or
Well,
whatever?
the total numbers, roughly about 4% end up being what we would call deadbeats. So it's not very many.
of everybody paying child support?
In this counny, yes.
Oh, goodness.
Just a small amount then, that's
Just
4%.
Yeah,
small
it
amount.
is. I guess I just got a good dose of the ones who weren't paying.
You were hiring the bad people.
Well, now they look
Welcome to my world,
great workers, but they just couldn't afford to work for what was left over when the child support was due.
It's self-propriety. The federal government allows the states to take up 55% of someone's take-home pay, which you can't do in a garnishment. You remember when you had people that actually were garnished for a judgment, you can only take 23%. The problem is that once they get into that category of deadbeat, which of course is not an official designation, but we know the people that we see quite a bit, they're given lots of opportunities.
Recidivism, is that the term? You see the same people a
Oh,
lot?
yeah. And what happens is that the Department of the Bureau of Enforcement through the Department of Social Services tries to work with those people, including giving them more opportunities to make payment on the arrearage, to give them opportunities for jobs if they're not working, to help them get their driver's licenses. They even actually have a job coordinator who tries to find them jobs. So when they choose not to work, frankly, my sympathy really disappears anyway.
Well, again,
Since I paid for my kids, and I know you did. too.
I did. Oh, yeah, I did my share.
Yeah, no,
My
we
point
did.
is this 4% is very low, so I was surprised to hear that. I'm glad to hear that, actually. I mean,
It's
not-
through the state of Maryland, it's less than 6%. So it tends to be the same people. We see the same names all the time. When I first started as a prosecutor, we actually would bring criminal charges against chronic users of the system, abusers of the system. But today, most people, they don't do that because, especially with the pandemic, because you have to have a willful violation. Now, someone like what you just talked about who quit their job not to pay it, that's willful. And that's certainly somebody who could qualify criminally.
Okay. Well, again, I just was trying to tell you the world I was used to, but
Oh, I
that's
know.
only the 4% world.
That's why I started smiling, because I knew you were going to say it, because frankly, it's something that my brothers and sisters on the bench, we've discussed more than once.
Okay.
It's a fine-edged sword. Which side is right, which side's wrong? The bottom line is, the whole purpose is for the interest of the children. And people don't realize that the custodial parent is not truly the recipient of the money. It's the child or children who are supposed to be getting the benefit of it.
Right.
Anything else, guys?
Anything else, anybody? Okay, I got a first and second, all in favor? Aye. Any disapproval? Ayes have it. Thank you,
guys.
Judge. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Next on the agenda is Department of Emergency Services with the agreement with College of Southern Maryland for the paramedic clinical experience training.
Morning, Commissioners.
Good morning. Morning.
This is a good one. This is building for our future. So currently, this is being accomplished through advanced life support. And what occurs is that as there are college students in paramedic school, they need clinical experience, so they ride with advanced life support. This agreement is in effect with the ALS unit. Of course, now as we begin to put on career services for paramedics, we're going to need to do the same. So this agreement allows us to provide that clinical experience for these new paramedics. And again, this is building for our future. So there's no expense, and it is something that we need to do, and I would request that you approve this agreement.
Mr. Walker, this looks like a great deal for the county. It helps to train people. It helps our citizens out.
It does.
This looks like a win-win all around.
Yeah, it is a good idea.
So, Mr. Walker, one of the good things is little known to many is I sit on the accreditation board for CSM for the paramedic program. So this has been 3 years in the making of working with them, having talks with Ms. Johnson, and that's her maiden name because I'm blanking on her married name now. But either way, it's taken a lot of work on their end and a lot of work on the county's end. And I'm glad we're going to be able to provide these services and fall into the first county that is actually considered a training county, turning out the force. But they have agreements in place with other counties, but not like we're doing. So I appreciate your efforts and everything that you're doing.
I move to approve the agreement between the Commissioners of St. Mary's County and the College of Southern Maryland for the purpose of providing paramedic students with actual clinical experience required for certificates, and have Commissioner President sign any related documents.
Second.
Little discussion. I've had some calls about fire training. Have we worked on any of that by chance? I was outside of this paramedic.
About our training
For firemen, and I suppose there's been I've had a couple of people complain about they couldn't get the proper fire training.
So that
And-
is something that comes under our recruitment coordinator. I am
Okay.
actually working on that with the fire department.
Okay, yeah.
I do think that you'll probably see a letter come from the Fire Board Association, but I
Good.
do think there are some avenues for us to correct that.
Yeah, someone saying working with the seamanship school and the
Yes.
possibility of one of them. Okay.
Yeah, somewhere something got dropped, but we're going to jump into that because that's very similar to this. That's our.
Yeah, have a
future.
local training area.
Right,
Area
right.
important. That'd be great. That'd be
Yeah,
great.
we'll address that. I don't see how that should be happening, and I think in the fall, we should have that
Okay.
corrected.
You're talking about the fire rescue program.
Well,
The-
firemen, yeah.
Yeah, because they were short. We had students that were in the fire program that were shorted fire credit hours
Yes, there was.
due
Because the
to.
instructors didn't show up.
Yeah, because the MIFRE instructors didn't show up. So there was a lot of issues that went on with that. Now they're trying to make up those hours and work it out with MIFRE through the training facility. So
It's got to be alternatives. If they
There-
can't do
Right.
it, there's got to be somebody else that can.
Asked about alternatives for that, yeah.
CSM is picking up the slack with the EMT program. Ms. Johnson is also
Good.
leading on that one. And on the fire side, just like you had said at the School of Seamanship, they're working on how they're going to do the fire side. So it's coming together.
Just something broad, but I just want to make sure you're aware of it anyway. I have a first and second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you, Commissioners. And next is also from the Department of Emergency Services regarding a memorandum of understanding between Emergency Services and the St. Mary's County Advanced Life Support Unit.
So as you are well aware, we're moving into career services. Certainly, we don't quite have the resources yet to be able to to have a facility and have enough vehicles. This really is very similar to other agreements we've got with other rescue squads. So what this does is, this is a good partnership, and it is a very good partnership. We met and worked it out very well. But this allows us, our paid employees, to drive advanced life support vehicles and use their bunks and facilities when we have to do that. Again, this is just more of a housekeeping to get it done, to make sure we're good, and just kind of a review that, we pay for the employee, all the personnel costs, they pay for the vehicle and all the insurance costs. Really, there's no impact on the finances for that. But again, very similar to what we have in the rescue squads. So this is just something that we need to do. We've got a good agreement, good partnership, and I would ask that you approve it.
I move to approve the memorandum of understanding between the Commissioners of St. Mary's County and the St. Mary's County Advanced Life Support Unit for the purpose of sharing EMS resources and the delivery of service to our community, and to have Commissioner President sign any related documents.
Second.
I have a first and second. All in favor? Aye. Any disapproval? I have it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioners. And Mr. Walker also has the Hazard Mitigation Planning Committee bylaws,
EMS did.
and Mr. Gardner is here as well.
I would ask that he join me, please. My emergency manager, our emergency manager, does an excellent job. So to really what this is as we moved into making this an official committee, this is finalizing and getting the bylaws set into place, which we just hadn't done. It had operated very efficiently, but this does our bylaws. I don't know if you want to add to it, but basically this is just coming to you for approval so we can have our bylaws intact. And of course, we will certainly be living by that and abiding by that as we move through our operations and hazard mitigation.
I move to approve the Hazard Mitigation Planning Committee bylaws in accordance with Resolution 2006-35 and 2017-42, and authorize Commission President to sign all related documents.
Second, discussion. Mr. Gardner, I want to thank you for reaching out to the people over there at Maypole Road with the Macintosh Run. I'm not going to say they're very happy, but I think they're very happy with the response that we've been able to provide them and the updates that you and your committee has been able to provide them and seeking out their inputs, and that's been a good move, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a first and second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner.
Real quick, just want to, I've had a conversation with you, but I think that your staff needs a public acknowledgement for hiring 50 people in 2 weeks and going out, making sure they were turned over, certified, doing a schedule covering 290 of 300 shifts, working till 11:30, 12 o'clock at night to make it happen, getting the equipment, these agreements. And, I said I was going to come over there, and I spoke to Commissioner Morgan about coming over there, but we felt it was best just to acknowledge you publicly so the citizens knew at the same time. No small feat. So thank you very much.
I have a great staff. They work very hard, and that's how we got it done. But thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Commissioners. Next, we had the St. Mary's County Board of Elections to discuss the early voting centers. I know Ms. Atkins is here. I know we were waiting for Ms. Panos. She thought she had court this morning, would be here by about 9:30. The problem is, what's next is the Department of Finance, which is going to be a while because that's the American Rescue Grant request. Do you mind if we start without Ms. Panos? Well, come on up, please. Thank you for your indulgence, Commissioners.
Morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Morning.
So, Commissioners, we're here to discuss, as you know, the new legislation that was passed last year now mandates that St. Mary's County has to have 2 early voting centers with an optional, if the voting, Ms. Adkins' group and the commissioners agree, it could also have a 3rd one as well. So she's here to get direction from you. Is that a fair statement, Ms. Adkins? I don't know if there's anything you'd like to say, or...
No, that's what we're here for, is to find out if you all want us to do a 3rd optional early voting center.
Excuse me, would you pull the microphone close to you, please?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
And what you have currently is there's a Hollywood one, and you've also, had discussions with the Lexington Park Fire
Yes,
Department?
we have, we went ahead and signed a contract with the Bay District Firehouse for the south end of the county because that's more populated area, so that we thought the second site that's required would do better in that area.
Okay. Do you have a presentation you want to give us first, or do we need to discuss the third site?
I'm sorry?
Did you want us to discuss the third site, or you want to talk about
Well, it
your
is,
findings? I mean, you've had your board meeting and everything, so if you can go through your findings and let us know what your recommendation is.
right, so as you know, required by law, we're required to have two. So we're going to have one at the Hollywood Firehouse and one at the Bay District. The third site is optional. And the only way I can approve a third site if all three stakeholders will approve a third site, which the stakeholders are you as the governing body, because you all have to fund it. And then the second one is the local board, and the third one is the state board. So if all three entities agree for us to perform a third site, we will go ahead and perform it. I do have a site lined up on hold, just in case, because there is a lot of problems finding a big enough site in the county to reserve for early voting centers, and in a lot of places reserve up many, many years in advance. So I want to go ahead and jump on something. If I have to do it, then I have it on site. So I do have the Mechanicsville Firehouse on hold for the north end of the county if we want to go ahead and do the third optional site.
Ms.
Well,
Atkins, could you talk to us just about how you determine where to locate the sites? I mean, I definitely understand population being a motivator, but just thinking, in my mind, early voting goes on for a longer period of time, for a week, right?
8
And
days,
so
yes.
it gives people a chance to vote who can't vote on election day for whatever reason, or it just opens up the window.
Right.
So we have, our primary employer is the base. Most people here work on the base, but we have a large percentage of our population that commutes and goes up to DC, outside of the county, so they're going north through the county. So perhaps a northern location would be beneficial to those people that as they come home in the evening, they could stop in and early vote there. If they can't make it home to Lexington Park, Valley Lee, wherever, to their precinct to vote on election day. I don't know how do you determine where to locate?
Well, election day, you'll have multiple polling places throughout the county. That's not the three centers. So election day, we have Letty Dent, we have White Marsh. All those places are available on election day. Now, just for the 8 days of early voting, which is the week prior to election day, we would only have the three sites. But you can go to any site. The only thing about election day, it's also based on where they live, so that their whole
Right.
ballot will count. So if they go to a wrong precinct on that day, their whole ballot may not be counted because of the legislative district that they live in. So the ideal thing for them to do is to come to an early voting center where that does not matter.
Exactly.
To give them full options of all the locations would be ideal.
Because everybody can go to either center. If you got early voting, 2, 3 centers, anybody can go anywhere.
Anywhere,
Right.
yes, correct.
Commissioner Colvin, I would also, in the packet that we provided for this, we provided House Bill 745, and on the third page of it goes over 5 factors that they're supposed to look at in determining the location of an early voting center. If you'll see it in black there, numbers
Okay, thank you.
1 through 5.
So how did you unilaterally decide to have Bay District and Hollywood? And I looked at your numbers, and I tried to figure out how everything north of St. Andrews Church Road through Wildwood and things like that considered to be the south, when obviously they're much closer in proximity to Hollywood. How'd you come up, why'd you do that?
To our Bay District, well, it's also the facility that will handle a large crowd, and there's not a whole lot of options in the county for something that will handle 20,000 people that we did at Hollywood Firehouse last election. So we have to find a facility that will handle and that has security, surveillance. We have to have ballot drop boxes out there. Electioneering has to be, utilized, and we have to be able to plan for long lines inside and outside the building, plus parking is a major.
That wasn't my question. My question is, how did you decide that Wildwood and areas up north of St. Andrews Church Road in that California were designated to be in the Bay District area versus the Hollywood area?
Well, they're not for early voting.
I saw your numbers. You had S's in north and middle and south, and clearly you picked Wildwood to be in the south.
Wildwood, I thought I picked in the middle. Well, it depends on the election district. If it's in the 8th, then it's considered the south, because that's where the election district as a whole within the precincts. But, I mean, that's,
But that's not how early voting is set up. That's not how the factors play into the law. So if you consider that a part of the South, then it skews the numbers to push it down south.
I mean, as far as my numbers go, I mean, I have 46% of the registered voters are in the South, 33% of the registered voters are in the middle, and 21% of the registered voters are in the north.
So when you did this, you basically considered the 8th district to be all south, period.
Yes.
Well, that's sort of tainting the numbers a little bit, if you ask me.
Well, if they were not in the, I mean, if it's the South, it'd be middle.
Excuse me?
The Wildwood, if it's not in the South, the 8th district, it would be more considered in the middle.
Well, that's what I would be considering also.
Yeah.
Now, my next question is you've had a hard time with volunteers. So how do you plan to staff 2 or 3 sites when you couldn't even hardly staff 1 the last time?
Start recruiting now. This is why the main thing we wanted to come in front of you all, because we have to start recruiting now.
And how many people does it take to staff a booth
At least 25 to 30.
per day? And people don't work every single day, 12 hours, do they?
Sometimes they do, sometimes they want to volunteer for every single day. We're going to back, if we can, if we have enough volunteers to sign up, we're going to back that down because it is a lot to work all 8 days in a row.
Okay, also, you have a number of stations per location. Are these divided equally, or do you just haphazardly decide how to weight them?
It depends on the number of equipment that we place into the polling room. So if we have 5 poll books, then I have to have 5 individuals to man those poll books. If we have 4 machines, then I have to have 2 people per machine. So it depends on the size of the precinct and the number of voting booths to escort to the voters to the voting booths. If we have 15 voting booths, then I have to have at least 5 or 6 people to man that area.
So you're saying that you would not distribute stations equally between sites?
Early voting, I will, yes.
So in early voting, if you have 30 booths, 30 stations, for example, it'd be 15 or 10,
Yes,
and everybody be treated equally.
yes.
So when you said the state has to approve a 3rd location, okay, well, in all technicality, we already have 3 because you do early voting at the Board of Elections. So the law requires 2.
No, don't.
Let me back up. The Board of Elections is not an early voting center. You can come and do an absentee ballot, and it would be counted after the election, but it's not treated as an early voting center.
Okay, so it by definition, it's treated as an absentee ballot. Okay.
So just another question. Sorry, we're jumping all over the place for
Fine,
you
that's
all
fine.
this morning. Talking about the election as a whole, it's going to be a little different this upcoming election. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but every voter is going to get an application in the mail for an absentee ballot. Is that correct?
Yes, as far as I
So-
know.
Yeah, that was my question, too. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So every voter will have the option to vote absentee if they would like.
Right.
Without any question.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
And there's also, they're introducing a permanent absentee list. So if somebody wants to sign up for a permanent absentee, they can now do that.
In my mind, that somewhat takes away the need for an extra early voting center.
Yes, and my thought process is that, we're a peninsula, and it seems like we could divide up the county 3 ways with 2 centers. I personally think Mechanicsville and Lexington Park's a good idea. I mean, this idea of voter disenfranchisement is something we need to address. We've heard about it, people have said it, and we need to make sure people can vote. One question I'd like to ask you, though, actually a couple, would be these drop-offs for these, will those continue to be distributed around the county? So
Yeah,
you
that's
could-
a permanent thing now. So we will always have the ballot drop boxes located throughout the county so people can drop them
And how many of those do you typically have?
That-
mean, 2
I don't
or
know yet. The state
5?
is supposed to decide how many we get per county now.
Okay.
So it may be, we had 10 last time, so it may be 5, 6, 7, I'm not sure. So they're supposed to let us know those numbers.
My point is, that's an additional way for people to be able to vote,
Yes.
and that's something new. Now, as someone who's been in this county,
They drop off their absentee ballot in those, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we pick them up at least once a day, sometimes twice a day, depending on if we're getting close to a deadline.
again, I think that's a very important thing. As someone who's been in this county long enough to remember you voted on Election Day, or you had an absentee or a provisional ballot, and that was it.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that was it. And I'm very happy that we are expanding these ways for people to vote. My next question gets to be, though, is when you're talking about 200, my opinion is 200,000, because you have to pay these people, I'm sure. I know you do. I know the answer to that question, I'm sorry.
Yes.
And the fact that you're having trouble finding people, the other thing I've heard from people who are election judges is that once they go there, they can't leave.
No.
They got to stay there like all day long. They feel like they're, and if it's slow or whatever, they just feel like they're.
Right.
And the good news is we don't have the pandemic, or hopefully we won't have the pandemic influencing people who want to get out and help. So that's hopefully a good thing. But my question gets to be, is I know some people who have voted absentee the longest time. They don't want to be bothered with going and standing in line like you're talking about or doing something like that. What is the percentage of absentee? Is it like 2% of the voters or 5, or is it low?
I would say it's gone up in the past years because of the pandemic and the primary election. We only had to do basically mail in, and we had only one election day. I would say it's gone up to at least 5 or 6%. Because it's convenient, you know?
Yes.
And a lot of people can request it online, and they get the link directly emailed to them, so all they do is print out their ballot, fill it out, and mail it to us. There's no back and forth, it's just a one-way street.
Okay,
where they
now-
can drop it off in a ballot box.
The next thing I'll go to is location from an early voting center, how far you have to drive.
Yeah.
So when someone says, excuse me, Bay District, if I live in Scotland, that's a good little drive. But if it's in Hollywood, which I'm not trying to say we shouldn't do Hollywood, but I think Mechanicsville should be because it would be equidistant from people, say, from Leonardtown to Mechanicsville, or people from Charlotte Hall down to Mechanicsville. It seemed like that would be a better equidistant if we go with 2. Now, if you go with 2, or if somehow this decision comes out to be 2, would you revisit where you place these?
Well, right now, for Hollywood Firehouse, since it's so well established, I have to sign contracts. I have a contract signed out to 2028.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, I have to go that far.
So we're
because
kind of
it-
roped into that location.
Sorry?
We're kind of committed to that location.
Yeah. I mean, because it's so popular, it's the biggest center in the whole county. They're signing leases up to 2026 now, so I try to go at least 2 years ahead of time because I can't change the election dates and I have to have those
All
dates.
right. I didn't know that was the case. I mean, it's just, I can see people saying Charlotte Hall, well, Hollywood's a long haul. But I also can see people saying Scotland.
Right,
Here,
right, because the county is so long, it is difficult.
All right, so you have
Here's-
those pieces in effect. Okay.
Here's the issue that I have with the way it's set up right now. It says accessibility of the early voting center to historically disenfranchised communities, including cultural groups, ethnic groups, and minority groups. So when I read number 1, all right, obviously Delegate Crosby pushed it, the NAACP pushed this, and that's fine. However, what I feel that the Board of Elections has failed to bring into this beyond population in this factor is in the north end of the county, we have a Amish and Mennonite community that far outweighs the population in Lexington Park. We have a Hispanic population that far outweighs the population in Lexington Park. Okay, we have multiple cultural groups, and we also have those that have developmental disabilities that are still able to vote, and we have the Veterans Home with hundreds of disabled veterans, which far outweigh anything in Lexington Park. So when you talk about minority groups, we have disabled veterans, disabilities, religious, Amish and Mennonite, Hispanic. So then you go down and it says maximizing voter participation. So the only way that they can get to these places is either through paying somebody to drive in a van, somebody that will take them there because they can't drive, obviously, horse and buggy, or they're going to have to get transportation from the Veterans Home. All right, so all of these things need to be kept in mind when making these decisions. So we're focusing on one minority group, and then we're forgetting that we have plenty of others in the county. Now, I'm not insinuating that you're just focusing on one. What I'm saying is the focus has been on one minority group, and the rest have been left by the wayside. And
Well, I don't mean to interrupt you, but for Charlotte Hall Veteran Home, we do go in person and take absentee ballots and help them vote in person and bring them back to our office.
okay, but that's not an early voting center. So that you could do the same thing in Lexington Park.
Right.
Okay, you could go door to door and do the same thing. So that's a moot point. I mean, they're either way. But I do appreciate you going there for the veterans and doing that. So I want to make sure that's considered in approving a third location, because the other portion of this, Commissioner Colvin makes a very, very valid point, is if I work in DC or I live in the north end of the county, I don't want to have to drive all the way further south to vote. Now, you've already told us leaving Hollywood is not an option. And you've said you've already established a contract with Bay District. So you've said you have these 2 locations. So the only thing here today is to make sure that the Board of Elections isn't discriminating against the Amish, the Mennonite, the Hispanic, and the rest of the groups that I already mentioned in the north end of the county. So the way to make sure that happens is to get the third early voting location and working with the state. And it's going to have to be staffed. Otherwise, this isn't fair and equitable across the board like this bill says.
Sure, absolutely.
So, I mean, that's the way I view it. I mean, so you got a hard road ahead of you. But, I want to make sure that all of these groups are taken care of.
Ms. Atkins, is this mailing of all absentee ballots to everybody, is that something new that's just started, or have you been doing that?
Well, we did it for the primary because of COVID. Everybody got an application.
Right. I remember getting one, yeah.
So that I think they considered, because of the turnout of absentees, that they wanted to make that a permanent thing to give the people the option to utilize the absentee process.
So you would have the ability to vote,
Yes.
even if you did drive to DC, or if you were in circumstances where it's hard to get down to Hollywood, it's hard to get down to Bay District.
Yes,
You would have it.
absentees for everybody. There is not,
You see that being something that's going to continue into the future, this idea of
no, I believe so.
Actually, I think-
Can't say it's set in stone. It's up to the
great idea?
legislators, but,
Yeah. And of course, there's no cost to the person to return the ballot.
right, everything's posted, paid.
Yeah.
Yes.
And how do you ensure the integrity of all these absentee ballots?
I'm sorry?
How do you ensure the integrity of all these absentee ballots?
To coming back or return?
Well, you said you can get an application for an absentee ballot, if I heard correctly. Not everybody gets an absentee ballot to start.
Right.
So they apply for an absentee ballot, and then, like I said, then they have to come back, and how do you ensure that integrity?
Well, once they applied for an absentee, we put it in our system, and then it's automatically sent. The state has a contract with the mail house, but it's all the way, has a barcode on it, so that it's sent to that, directly to that person, and if anybody else returns it, we have a way to track it because of the signature. We look at the signature, the oath of the signature, and we make sure that nobody has, has an absentee application on file if they didn't return, if they returned a ballot.
Well, what do you do when they die?
That is, I believe it changed, the law changed, that if they died before Election Day, it's counted. If they died after Election Day, it's not counted.
So when they die, do you purge the records?
Yes, after every 2 federal elections, if they're in an inactive status, we purge our election rolls.
Every 2 federal elections, so every 8 years?
It's every election, so, because there's a federal race on every election now, so it's after every election.
Okay.
So right now, as of this coming election, everybody's going to be mailed an absentee ballot.
Yes.
An application for an
An
absentee.
application.
Application,
Just
not a
the
ballot.
application.
Just the application.
So they either have to go online or mail that back to you to get their actual.
Yes.
Okay.
While we've got you here, I know Commissioner Morgan referenced it a little bit, but election security is always an issue, and I've heard from your office before about this, but just for people listening, could you talk a little bit about the security that's done around the drop boxes, because it is a very safe process here.
Exactly, yes. We have video surveillance 24/7 on the ballot drop boxes, and they are locked and sealed by our staff, so if the seal is broken or whatever's tampered with, we know, because we're the ones that seals, and we log those seals every time we go into and from a lockbox. On election night at 8 o'clock, we have staff there to lock it up. We also have been in contact with the sheriff's office, and they know to do drive-bys every so often of the ballot drop boxes, and they're on call if we need them. And the ballots are handled by my staff and my staff alone to retrieve and bring them back.
Well,
Ms. Panos has now joined us.
Morning.
Good morning.
Apologize, I was in court.
Okay.
Mr. President, I move to approve submitting a written request to the St. Mary's County Board of Elections for the purpose of establishing a third early voting center for St. Mary's County.
Second.
Any discussion?
I just think it's too much money, and if you can't find the people and you're doing the absentee ballots, I just think 2's enough. I'm sorry that you're signed into Hollywood, because I'd like to see Mechanicsville as an alternative, but
The question I don't think is so much, and I agree with you, the money's an issue. However, it's as Commissioner O'Connor brought up, it's the fair and equal treatment of all the citizens of this county. And the equal is my word. I'm not using any other word, but equal treatment of everybody under the law. So therefore, I think that's the reason I would support a third site.
Well, I understand it too, but we're talking about $4 million more, right?
What?
2 million per center, right?
No, 200,000.
200,000%.
Oh, it's 200,000 per center.
But don't you have to pay for the help too? What
That
do
is
your-
included.
What do your judges cost you?
That's included in that.
That's including 200,000?
Yes.
It's
Oh, I'm sorry.
$190,300.
That includes a hall rental and all that good stuff, the 200,000 per center. And my concern is also that, well, this 200,000 is not bad as I thought it was going to be. I misunderstood the reading here. Any other questions on it? I have a first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any disapprovals? Ayes have it.
No.
No, one no. Good luck on staffing them both. That's going to be the biggest problem is staffing them.
Let me ask
No
this,
doubt.
if you don't get them staffed, what do you do? I mean, you're going to divide your staffs up now? Or?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you divide them up and it'd be less numbers in each one of the centers.
Yes, and
Right.
the county also helps because they give administrative leave for anybody that serves an election
Right,
judge, and the
right.
state also does the same thing, so.
Yeah, we
that's
do
a
all
diff-
that for you, yeah,
So
understand.
now this will continue forever.
Yes.
We'll have three.
Be
for-
permanent, yes.
Very good. If you need any help with advertising, VMS boards, things like that, please let us know. Mr. Walker has all the boards and can help out and get them out there with a message.
Definitely,
Okay?
yes.
Yeah, please.
Thank you
Thank you.
Thank you.
very much.
Have a good day.
Thank you, Ms. Atkinson. Okay, next, Commissioners, we have the Department of Finance to approve the budget amendment to roll project in the FIN 22 Capital Reserve. Ms. Jeanette Cudmore presenting.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, Commissioners, this is our annual process. We are closing out the FIN 21 CIP reserve, and we're opening up the 22. It's, here we are in a new fiscal year, and process is pretty much the same. So this budget amendment will close the balance in the FY FIN 21 CIP reserve, moving transfer tax and PAYGO funding, creating the new FIN 22 reserve, allowing us to budget for CIP changes received outside the budget cycle, totaling $94,194. It's a little bit smaller this year. Bonds unsold of $2.1 million will be decreased along with the expense, providing more bond authority that will be available for the FY 2023 budget.
It's pretty straightforward.
Yep.
I move to approve the budget amendment closing FIN 21 Capital Reserve, rolling to the FIN 22 Capital Reserve, and authorize the Commissioner President to sign the related document.
Second.
Have a first and second, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you, Commissioners. And next is the Department of Finance to present the American Rescue Grant request.
Good morning, Commissioners. Again, this is follow-up to your June 22nd meeting, and you asked that we bring forward all the people that are, or departments and agencies that are requesting the funding of the American Rescue Act funding. And so today, and also since that meeting on June 22nd, you'll remember that the requests were like $69 million at that time, and those requests primarily were all received like in April and May before the closing and the removing of the state of the emergency for the pandemic, and now they've actually come in and they're only $36.5 million. So it's a little bit more manageable. So you can see right now, the $36.5 million is broken up with what was already allocated in the approved 22 budget of the $992,000. Department of Emergency Services is requesting $1 million. Fire departments, $3.7 million. Department of Public Works and Transportation, $1.4 million. Department of Information Technology, $4.7 million. Department of Recreation and Parks, $840,000. Sheriff's Office is requesting $2.6 million. Metcom is requesting $10.6, and the Health Department is actually $10.5 now. What has been removed was the request for economic development And that's also changed because a lot of the businesses and whatnot are open now or will be continuing to be opening. And so they felt a lot of that, the relief funding for the businesses and whatnot was not needed. And also the request for the human resources has been removed with removing the vaccine incentives and the other costs that they had requested, and the emergency help and whatnot. So we're down to the 36.5. We have a listing that was provided to you, and it is actually 2 pages, and I have letters and requests from each of the departments and agencies. And the first one is the Department of Emergency Services. So we'll go ahead and get right into that if Mr. Walker is here.
Yes, ma'am. Me first.
You're first.
So you want me to start?
Sure, go for it.
So these are in order of priority. So, as you see, number 1 is our most important going down the list. The number 1 is the 911 recording system. The Sheriff's Department identified a weakness in our recording system. We had a number of incidents where there were pieces of the recordings that were not there. So we reached out to the Harris Corporation, and this was the proposal to be able to fix that so that we wouldn't lose any information whatsoever. So that's what that specifically is. Interoperability solution, this is something that you've heard about in the past. It has expanded because of some of the features that are needed to do it. The encryption feature, which is quite a bit expensive, $160,000, that's to allow specifically the Sheriff's Department to communicate with other jurisdictions. That encryption, of course, is only for law enforcement.
Let me ask you about that. Is that, I'm not questioning the price, but I just remember, again, when I had a shop, we had a scanner all the time, and, not that, just activity going on around the county. My point being is that was encrypted because, was there an issue with someone knowing what the police are doing, or how's that work?
I can't really speak to that. That is, the sheriff is absolutely determined to keep it encrypted, and we've discussed that. I agree with it. I think that's an appropriate response.
I'm not trying to say I disagree with that. I
Right.
just don't
But
understand. Is there
It is what
sensitive-
you're describing, that way that the people in the community cannot listen in and use it for ill purposes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
The second part of that, of course, is something we've talked about. The state of Maryland interoperability, Calvert County is finally ready for us to communicate. And again, unfortunately, it's an expensive venture that we would have to pay for. Emergency services box truck, this is something that we experienced in the COVID, in the heart of that. When we were delivering, this specific truck has a lift on the back to be able to lift things up and down and unload. That is what it's for, to deliver that. Again, it is a direct support of the first responder system. Overtime costs, that's an easy one. We obviously are incurring a lot of expense for EMS, and that specifically will help for that purpose. Expansion of VHF radio services. We did some work on this. This is an expansion of that. Really what got me to thinking that we should expand on this was the search for the 2 young gentlemen that were missing. Fortunately, turned up, but there was a lot of search going on the river for those 2 gentlemen. The system we have is fair. This would make it good. Automatic overhead doors for radio shop building. So we now have, of course, emergency vehicles in there. So when we're doing emergency response, the first responders would come in and have to physically go in, pull the chain and open the door, delaying the time. This would allow them to do that quicker. So that's specifically what that is for. So those are my requests, and I'll answer your questions.
So, Mr. Walker, you referenced you get to go first, so I'm not saying yes or no to anything on your list right now. I think this is an especially difficult, I would say even more difficult than our budget process was, because we have a finite amount of money here.
Yes.
And every request that's been put in is a valuable request with a lot of benefits for the county. What I'm specifically looking for as we go through this list is the one-offs with the long-term impact for the county. So basically getting the most bang for the buck out of this one-time $22 million grant that we've got. So I'm just letting you know and everyone else know kind of what's going on in the back of my mind as we go through this list.
I would say the first two for me are absolutely long-term. They are directly going to be responding and assisting our first responders. So those two, if I had to pick something, those two are absolutely, in fact, if it doesn't come here, I will have to come back and ask for it in a future budget request, so.
And Commissioners, all of the requests this time, they were put in here in priority order from each of the departments and agencies that are requesting.
Well, Mr. Walker, you've had a tough time this pandemic year, and I support you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take.
Thank you very much, appreciate it. It's been an interesting ride, but we are doing so much for the community, so it's good news.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Steve. Commissioners, the next items are from the fire departments. I don't know if Mr. Nelson is here.
They were requested and notified today.
Okay. So they've got a number of requests here. Roughly it totals about, I think it was $3.4 million, Commissioners. And they're listed in the detail. They've got fit test machines for $83,655. And again, these were also put in to help out in priority order. Thank you. The PPE washer and extractor, you might be needed to explain what they actually are. The PPE dryer, I guess that makes sense. It's going to dry your PPE. Your personal protective gear for $543,120. Self-contained breathing apparatuses for $846,000, and a lot of these are going to be purchased and then sent out to the different fire departments. The mass decon tent for $103,225. The vehicle exhaust removal system, that is going to be $472,950, and I missed the air cleaning system for $128,400, and the Hollywood Volunteer Fire Department bunk room renovation for $200,000, response vehicles at $630,000. I believe that's a response vehicle for each station, and then a Cascade air filling system for $580,110.
So I've had some conversations about this, and the one thing I would say is that the mass D content should be something that comes out of DES, because any mass casualty we have with a mass decon is going to be rolling out of the hazmat unit, which is a unified command, which is coming out of DES. So really, when it comes down to it, 6 through 11 are, with the exception of 9, for the bunk room renovation, because that ties into making it a safe area for decontamination is extra for me. The SCBAs, the PPE, the dryer and the washers are important to remove the cancer-causing contaminants and carcinogens, and the fit test machines for the SCBAs. I mean, all those are important because they lead to long-term care and cancer deterrent. So, but everything else, I think, I don't know, Mr. Walker, how do you feel about it?
I think that's a pretty good assessment. I'm hesitant to speak for the fire department,
I know, yeah.
but I think you have a pretty fair assessment.
Any other questions, Commissioners, on that? Well, thank you, Mr. Walker. We'll go right on to the next.
Steve, for coming up. The next item is from the Department of Public Works and Transportation. I believe Mr. John Dietrich is here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I very carefully read through the guidance, the FAQs, the compliance requirements, went through all the rules. And then I considered DPW&T's major challenges that we've got and how these funds could potentially help bring home progress on these challenges and have progress for the citizens. So the first one 2 full-time grant-funded building maintenance 2 positions. These are, in effect, custodians. We requested those in the 2021 budget, but it was deferred for consideration under this source. We have more buildings. The buildings are now that we've got, all buildings are open to the public, so the cleaning issues are more intense. There are more people coming in. And these people, and I'll just read this second sentence, 100% of their time is spent on the front line of the battle to keep the county-owned buildings safe for employees and for the citizens who use the services provided in those buildings. So just if any of you have been to any of the libraries, the senior center, senior activity center, see the activity in and out of people's offices. You know, we're getting more people. I know at DPW&T, and I know economic development is. There's just more cleaning to be done. The bathrooms have to be handled more often, and that's the situation we're in. And so that's why I've got that one. And the rationale you can see below is from the FAQs, page 7. So any questions on that one?
So after 2 years, they would become, we would want to convert them into full-time.
We'd like to be able to do that, obviously, because over the next 2 years, we're going to add even more square footage to the building inventory. We'll have to, but the 2 years gives us a chance to try to figure out if there's something else we can do or a different way to do it, or I'm not sure. We're going to work on it, though, believe me, because we know we got that. If you approve these, we know that we've only got 2 years to sort it out.
Yep.
And who knows, where the tax receipts will be in 2 years. You may or may not be able to add additional positions.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got to figure this out. More buildings, more work.
I understand.
Ms. Cudmore, I don't know if I missed it, but is this just a briefing on what we've already read in the notes, or do you need actual determinations today? What are you looking for?
No decision today. This is just a briefing.
Yes, today's just presentations. We're going to come
Presentation,
back to you on the 20th for your decision on how you would like this money spent. This is in lieu into what was happened on the 22nd, where we brought to you a recommendation. You wanted the request to come back, and this is what we're doing per your direction.
So, Mr. Dietrich, can we jump down to your number 5? This rack project seems to just keep growing. And just curious as to why we're looking to use this funding for it. I thought we already had that project.
All right. The $2.7 million was based on some original estimates with some additional money. We're now on our 3rd engineering estimate to try to figure out if there's some way to get the site costs down. That's our big problem. It's over $1 million to prepare the site for that facility. And we're still going through the preliminary numbers we just got last week, but it doesn't look good. And I kind of saw this coming because we've already analyzed the cost twice before. We paid RC&D, and one of our people, John Wise, very experienced with site prep. He worked, a long time as an inspector for private work and knows it. And RC&D's and John's numbers were pretty much together. Some differences, but the totals were very close to the same. So we want to deliver this project somehow, and this site appears to be the best site, but it has topo challenges and soil challenges. And so that's kind of where we're at. It's my lowest
We're
priority.
spending $1 million just to prepare the site for a building.
Correct.
Is that because of the hilling or the marshiness of? I know it's very hilly back there.
Well, there's no utilities. That's
No utilities.
a big problem. There's no water. Well, there's water, but to get water to it, we have to run the pipe from 3 Notch Road and bring it over. And there's no sewer there, which is really the bigger problem. You need an immense septic system to be able to deal with it. But that's kind of the situation up in the north of the county. There's not, there isn't pipe sewer available.
Do we have any other sites? Are we looking at other sites close in that would?
Chris Castellamus and I, good question. Chris Castellamus and I talked for a while last night, and we went through a whole site selection process. It ended up there because it's close to the North Farm Market, which does have marshy land and couldn't handle having both the North County Farm Market plus the rack there. There just wasn't a way to get enough septic capacity. And but it's close to the market for selling the product, and it's also close to the Amish slaughtering facility. And the Amish are off and running with that. They got their USDA certification, and they are producing product there now, which has to go to, they're trying to do some prep on their site, but most of it has to go to private butchers in order to.
Okay, understand.
So there's just not capacity right now. So that's why they're having something like the Regional Agricultural Center makes sense, because that would increase the ability to handle more product from the Amish, which they can produce.
Do we have any other land close by there that would work? How about behind the senior center, the Northern Senior Center?
Northern Senior Center.
We got land back there. I'm just wondering if there's anything else that's close in. I understand the closeness to the slaughterhouse of the Amish, but we seem to be to establish something that's closer and cheaper than $1 million repair.
We can continue to evaluate other sites. When we did the study for the best way to expand the Northern Senior Center, we did look at that property because there's 35 acres maybe there, and
About
something
that.
like that. And a lot of it is covered with a forest conservation easement, but there could be a possibility. It has the same challenges, with the water and sewer situation, but we're going to have to do something if we want to build a facility.
So
I
it sounds
agree.
like you're still got a lot of work to do on that. But sorry to jump around on you, Mr. Dietrich. The stormwater program manager.
Right.
Stormwater is kind of, we're bound to what the state says with a lot of that, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. Could you kind of tell us a little more about?
Yeah, it's actually a bigger problem than MS4. I mean, MS4 is kind of the sledgehammer that the state could use and fine us if we don't do the things. But it's mostly a matter, it's a complex problem, a mix of both public, we have some issues, the roadways, and also some of our older stormwater facilities. But a lot of it's on the private side, and it's mostly just kind of Mother Nature doing its thing. Something that was built 35 years ago, both erosion and sedimentation is going to affect it. So the ditches fill up, You know, you may be able to even notice that in your own yard where, you know, the grades change a little bit in the lawn over a period of time because there's a little bit of erosion that happens. And sometimes there's a lot of erosion. But all these things have, and plus the either non-existent or defunct HOAs are a big problem. And quite honestly, Don Mills is fantastic, but there's other things he needs to be doing than trying to design solutions. Plus, when we update our stormwater ordinance, we want to be able to, in one of our goals is to be able to take over these failed systems, ponds and so forth, redo them, and then send a bill to the people who are served by them. You know, because they, you know, either their HOA is defunct, it has no desire to tackle the problem, or maybe there's not even an HOA. The developer never set one up, you know, abandoned the project and left. Nevertheless, we got either a partially functioning or a non-functional, or maybe even a blown dam that has to be dealt with because MDE is watching us. And eventually, it's going to catch up with us. You know, even if you don't, you know, all this stuff is going in the bay. And, you know, either the Potomac, the Patuxent, but it all ends up in the bay. So it's really important to be able to get someone who can, well, we also have unmapped and unrecorded drainage easements the county has. And we got a couple of those where, you know, the owner doesn't want us to get in there. But we do have, Brandy McKelvey has found some legal rights for us to get in there. But it took her a long time to find out what we actually had the right to do, you know, by going back to the 30s maybe in deeds. So anyway, I've been going on and on about this because it's really a problem.
I'll give you an example from Mr. Dietrich. If you're familiar with Wildwood and you're behind the shopping center, you got the pond down there. Well, the pond's owned by a multiplicity of organizations, and that pond's been filling in for 40 years. So I get a lot of complaints about when it rains, the water just pours in. Now they're going to build those new townhouses there even more. So the water flows into the pond overflows. It runs down behind and floods everybody's house. Then infamously, if you know this, it all goes to Johnson Pond. And if you remember, we sat here a number of months ago talking about Johnson Pond, and the state's going, no, you got to fix the dam, you got to fix the dam. Well, the problem is that with the stormwater all coming from Wildwood into Johnson Pond, the pond fills up, and then we get yelled at because the dam is collapsing. As he says, MDE comes in and says, oh, you guys are bad. Well, if we blow up Johnson Pond, or the dam there, then the water flows into the St. Mary's River, and then the state comes back and says, well, what are you doing? We did what you asked us to do. We asked you to clean up Johnson Pond, fix the dam or don't fix the dam. You don't fix the dam and it goes into the St. Mary's River. So I had this conversation with MDE, with Mr. Dietrich. They weren't happy about the fact we could just blow up Johnson Pond's dam and let it all flow in the St. Mary's River because there was no repercussions that could take place. So what Mr. Dietrich saying is we have to go back after the 13 owners of who all own the pond at Wildwood and get that pond redredged and rebuilt so all the houses back there aren't flooded going into Johnson Pond. It's ridiculous in some cases, but that's my little soliloquy on that one.
Well, thank you on that. And the other problem with that pond is the weir is actually blown out. So the pond, you never see water overtopping that concrete weir because it can't. So that piece of concrete you see when you drive by it is literally floating in air, supported by, you know, concrete on the two sides. I mean, it is a really serious problem.
But
if that pond was dredged and that weir reconstructed, many problems would go away in that area.
Now, that whole PUD of Wildwood, not to just pick on that, but I'll talk about HOAs in general. When these people come in and get these approvals for whether it be the PUD at Wildwood or any other subdivision that's built, it comes in with requirements that these structures have to be maintained. Now, something like Wildwood is continuing to develop. Wouldn't Stanley Martin or the new owners of that be responsible for the effectiveness of that? And if you're saying no, why are we letting them continue to draw building permits when they have a structure
Stormwater
that's
management
failing?
problem. Yeah.
Huh?
And they, Commissioner Hewitt, in terms of the Wildwood Pond, we did research, and there are, I think, about 10 or 12 different entities that have what we call I&M agreements, inspection and maintenance agreements, where they did, and other easements that they're responsible for the upkeep and maintenance of that pond. So we've sent them all letters, and of course, as you know, I think we heard back from one, so now we're at the phase of issuing notice of violations and then tickets, and we'll get their attention that way.
Well, I guess my thought is instead of spending money on someone to look at this, why don't we just fund your department to go after these people to make sure they fix this stuff? I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. People have reached out to us and said that clear cutting, was bad.
Right.
And that always happens when it's woods, and then one next day it's clear cut.
Well, they certainly need the stormwater management inspector, because my understanding is we have an agreement with MES to inspect a third of our stormwater management facilities every year, and more are failing. And we're in the thousands. We're in the thousands of these stormwater management facilities, and, some are minor fixes, right? Because what happens is you have so many of these small subdivisions of 10 or 20 lot subdivision that the houses have been sold a couple times, and no one knows that they're supposed to mow the stormwater management facility, that they're supposed to keep it free of trees and debris. And so that'll be a simple fix, but then there's others that actually have a weir, or they have a stormwater management facility that's going to cost in the tens of thousands of dollars to fix. And it's going to be eye-opening for some of these communities when they start getting these letters. But my understanding is there's at least hundreds of these that need to be fixed. A lot of them are orphaned. And
Well, I guess my thought is, how have we got here? How do we get here?
Well,
I mean-
Wildwood,
Well, he's talking about thousands of.
there are thousands, and you can go through any community, and I'll use in my development district, all these stormwater management ponds you got to put in all over the place because MDE says you got to do it. So they do it, and as Mr. Weisskopf says, the homeowners associations go defunct, property changes hands, and all of a sudden, they come in and say, well, it's $300,000 to do this pond, and you got 10 owners, they say, well, it's a $30,000 bill each, and then we get blasted on this one.
Well, tell me, when someone comes in with an HOA that goes defunct, what would we be doing? Doing like a special taxing district?
what happens is this, right? You have a large development, right? It's one, before it gets subdivided, owner Mr. Jones signs an I&M agreement, right? And that I&M agreement, that inspection and maintenance agreement, flows to all the successors of title.
In perpetuity, or whatever that term is, yeah.
Right. And so what happens is now all of a sudden he's subdivided the big parcel into 20 lots, and so these people get it, and some of them, quite frankly, are probably not aware of what they've paid for. Right, in terms of that, they've now been saddled with this I&M agreement.
They should get a copy of settlement, don't they, sir?
Certainly. But
Whatever.
But no, that's what's going to happen is we're going to have to take these subdivisions, subdivision by subdivision, find out why it's failing, find out what the fix is, send the letter to all the residents and say, guess what? Your predecessor in title signed an I&M agreement.
This position can do that in 2 years?
We're going to have to. I mean, it's part of MS4 and as
Yeah, no, MS4 is a big deal.
Well, it actually, as they say on television, and there's more. There's a 311 request we get every day, or the ones that come directly to you that you then send to us, and that are to do with the county facilities, the roadway. And when you get to, as I mentioned in the write-up, Tall Timbers, Golden Beach, Bushwood. You get into areas that are flat, it's really hard to get the water to drain. So especially with that whole, as I was saying before, the sedimentation, the erosion, sedimentation, deposition, when the water slows down, the stuff falls out. And that creates a problem. And it's, quite honestly, it's not really climate change or anything. It's just time. And it's, that's the situation. And so the 311, when a 311 request comes in, it goes to Rick Tarr. He and/or one of his foremen go out and look at it, and they figure out what needs to be done. If it's something that can be done simply by dragging the ditch out, cleaning a pipe. If it's a bigger issue, then he brings in Don Mills, and this person would support Don in trying to develop solutions to these 311 requests, along with the other piece that you've already talked about.
We spent a lot of time on this. One thing I'll ask you just about number 2, these signing bonuses, it's minor, but why don't you give bonuses to the people who are driving? Lord knows, if I'm already a driver.
I'd love to.
And then you're just going to hire somebody else and you're going to give them a bonus to get a job. How's that make me feel as I'm the person who's been doing it? I just think there should be some kind of equity there.
Yeah, the private sector is actually doing that. If you've been following the news, I'm sure you've been following the news.
And talking about signing bonuses.
Yeah, but they've also been doing retention bonuses just because they're desperate.
Well, that's, I guess,
and in fact, I understand the public school system is, some of those operators may not be going through public schools, but the operators are actually paying people to show up and work. I don't have a direct verification of that. I've heard it from 2 different sources. And it's not something a government, we can do, but the private operator can do it if they're desperate.
I'd like to add a couple things on your list that we had sort of discussed before, and that is, we have these CIP projects out there that, just take forever to get done, and I'm being serious. I'm looking at sidewalks, in particular on Willows Road from Shangri-La down to Bradley. I'm looking at Peg Road from 235 down to Westbury, and I'm looking out here from the governmental center up to the library. Those are very frequently traveled paths. People are on the roads all the time, and we got to get these sidewalks built. And if we keep waiting for the CIP process to get there, we're probably not going to make it. So we have this opportunity now with the American Rescue Funds to take care of serving the people who have an equitable relationship, and we're trying to make it so they can get around. And I think that those sidewalks would at least be an opportunity to work with them.
Thank you. The problem on most of the issue is property. And Willows and South Shangri-La is progressing, but property issues, getting easements to be able to build the projects is what's holding most of those up from being bid.
Well, I've only waited 11 years. I've asked the same question, so we're still arguing at the same point.
But, and I'll provide an update to you all on the progress on the sidewalk projects.
Well, there is something happening in the town of Leonardtown regarding sidewalks out here to the new library, because I've seen stormwater management plans that have to go onto, this property.
Right. Yeah, but they didn't fund the construction, unfortunately. And
State didn't fund it.
It got pulled.
Okay.
Mr. Dietrich, I'd also like you to, if you can dig up the number, to fix that Route 249 issue down there on St. George's Island, where we're getting ready to wash out that section that's going to probably isolate 200 people. My point is that I remember that was something that, again, the state did not fund, but they came up with an idea how to fix it. If this would be something that we could fix and help those people down on St. George's Island, I think it would be a great idea. Could you come up with a number for that? I didn't know if it was millions or hundreds of thousands, but it talked about putting additional layers of asphalt on top of the existing road, and would reinforce that, plus make it high enough that they don't have to drive through water even on high tide.
And that's something you and Commissioner Colvin can bring up to MDOT at MACO next month.
And we
Oh,
will.
don't worry. But we all know.
Hit them hard with that.
Yeah, something that surprises me about MDOT a little bit is we got a letter from Ms. Johnson, and it talked to this challenge of trying to fix that. They had fixed it up in Chesapeake Beach, had the same issue,
Right.
laid more asphalt on top of existing asphalt, and the point was, it appears to have fixed that issue. But we can't get it down here in St. George's Island for whatever reason. And what I thought was very unique about Ms. Johnson's comments was, here's the plan, here's the fix, but don't tell anybody because we don't have any money. That part of it just strikes me as, when you got public safety at stake here,
Well, candidly, they had Mike Miller.
well, whatever. But the key gets to be people are not safe if they're having to drive through 6 inches
get
of
it.
water on a high tide, and if it's a hurricane or something like that, they're isolated down there.
Yeah, we actually have a meeting scheduled, don't remember if it's this week or next week, with the civic group down there to provide an update. And we're actually making some progress on the county part. Zane's got a project actually under design right now that you funded. So I'll do a summary memo from the results of that meeting, and it'll kind of wrap in wherever we are with Ms. Johnson, District 5. I also, on a related issue, I finally, last Friday, got a response back on MD 243, Newtown Neck, from their top hydraulic guy, who still had to run his response all the way up through the food chain. And essentially, they don't want to do anything there. And
Of course not.
so I went down and took a good look at that yesterday, and it's pretty clear what's going on. There's a stream that I forget the name of it right now that comes into what are the names of the two streams?
McIntosh Run.
Yeah, Matt, but I don't remember the name of the other one. It might be another town run. I think there are two. At any rate, it went in, where it goes into McIntosh Run is the worst problem, because that water comes down, you get backwater sometimes from the tide, and it's all silted up, that whole area. There's a culvert under the road that's pretty full, so I took a picture of that, and I'm going to send that up the road. And so a number of things are going on. So the water from this other stream overtops 243, along with backwater from McIntosh Run that can't, get down to, the main basin at Leonardtown.
It's definitely not optimal, but 243 has a second way out. I'm not saying, it's an important situation that needs to be figured out. But those people on St. George's Island have one way in and one way out.
One way out, right.
Yep. But maybe if we get this project stormwater manager, we can send the state a bill on fixing that.
We just get more capacity to be able to take on these things.
I understand.
And but I'll do a summary on both the sidewalk program and the where we are with 249 and and Piney Point.
Thank you.
Okay,
Any
Thank you,
other
Mr. Dietrich.
questions?
till next week.
Anything else from Mr. Dietrich now?
Any other questions on his request?
No. Thank you, John.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The next one is from the Department of Information Technology. Thank you, John. Mr. Bill Kelly is here. Thank you for coming.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Ellie? How's that arm doing?
Getting better every day, thank you.
Good to hear.
So, Commissioners, kind of a lengthy 2.5-page request, but I think there's actually 3 or 4 items. First one is a request for middle mile. That's asking for $1.5 million. It continues our middle mile projects. You may recall in January I came before you and you authorized me to do some analysis working with our vendors and seeing how many residents, how many addresses in the county that we had left that as best we could identify that are unserved with wired broadband. And we're not completely done with that analysis at this point. We still have some more work to do. But I would say that it's about 2,500 addresses that we have to connect. Some of those are quite distant from the road, and this middle mile project basically extends what we've been doing for several years. It infuses funding to expand that project. You may recall that the last time I was before you, Commissioner Guy, you authorized Commissioner Guy to sign a MOU with the statewide broadband, Governor's Office of Statewide Broadband, and we're expecting that award of about $400,000. We're expecting that paperwork to come back this week. And so this is a project that we've been doing for several years. It kind of takes our, the middle mile kind of gets to those pockets of homes, those pockets of addresses that are, 1 or 2 miles down the road from our infrastructure, gets infrastructure down there. And as you may recall, the last time I was before you, we're actually kind of shifting and making sure that we can get as many of those folks connected as possible. We were just kind of getting the infrastructure down there before, and if you were within 300 feet, then you could get service. But if not, you could pay for the connectivity. But since we're kind of in that sweet spot of getting close to finish middle mile and starting to do last mile stuff, it seems to make sense that if we're going down a road, connect as many people as we can. So that's the middle mile request. The last mile request, like I indicated, we're getting to the point where it's the onesie twosies now, right? And really, the methodology that I'm proposing here is I think it's been proven successful. It's the same methodology that we use for the Broadband for Unserved Students grant, that the $1.5 million that the state awarded through the CARES funding. And so basically it's distance, right? And so we would start maybe connecting folks that are 500 feet and do those first, and then do 1,000 feet and go until the request here is for 1.2. So go until do as many as we possibly can. The challenge with this last mile, I just point out, the challenge with this last mile and the difference from the bus grant is that with the bus grant, the Board of Education worked very closely with us, and we were able to get contact information. And so we don't have that for a lot of these folks. So that's an extra effort that we're going to have to do to reach out to those folks. We know the address, we just don't know who's there, and we have to find a way to reach those people. And so we're willing to do that. So that's the second request. Again, it expands what I think was a successful project with the bus grant.
So let me ask this question. Have you been working with the Board of Education? I mean, they're getting $25-30 million too. Yeah. And have they reached out to you to help support the infrastructure to the underserved students, or are they just letting it up to us?
So we are in communication. I'm working with Dave Howard. We talk many times a week, several times a week. We are still getting the updated addresses for students that are new addresses that are for students in the public school system. It's my understanding, though, that when I asked about the possibility of some of that funding, it's my understanding that all that funding is designated for instructional purposes. So I'm not sure that there's any broadband connectivity within that funding. But this, again, although there would be students with public schools in I'm calling it the Broadband for Unserved Citizens, or the BUCK grant, just because you have to have an acronym if you're in a Navy community. But if so there would be addresses there that have students, but it would fall in the distance category, not a priority for those students. And I would point out that the bus grant that we did, we're at 98.4% of our public school students have access to wired broadband. And so we monitor that and we update that monthly. The next portion of the request, Commissioners, is for facility and connectivity and security. This is mostly it's to our parks. We concentrated. There was a big interest in discussion with Mr. Shepard, and so getting connectivity. Getting wired fiber to those locations just opens up all sorts of opportunities, security-wise, with cameras, with security in some of the buildings, the facilities. And so I know there's a lot of interest in doing that. And the one that I didn't list here, but I did include in my thought process was the parking area up north.
Okay, the cars decide to spin out that one night?
Yes, sir. Okay. And so although we have cameras up there, we don't have connectivity back, so that's kind of a challenge. We have a machine that's hidden someplace up there, and when we need the resource, we have to go up and offload it. Mm-hmm. And we don't know when it's not working, right? So the connectivity. So we would add that to that. So that's the 1.5 that we're requesting there. And the final request is it's half of it's like phase one of a project that's very interesting that actually came out of the broadband assessment project that we did out of CARES. And it's basically a 50-50 match with the vendor to install towers in some of our unserved areas in our community. So this vendor did a unsolicited proposal to the county for 14 or 15 towers in those areas where there's no wireless coverage, and those, not surprisingly, but those overlap the areas where we're challenged with wired service. And so a 50-50 match for the construction of half of those towers is what was included in this request. And in return for that, the company's going to reserve, or the county's going to have the rights to install equipment on those towers. And so that's what we kind of negotiated with those guys. And so there's another project that Kendrick Gordon up at the Governor's Office of Statewide Broadband, he is in the midst of and waiting, hopefully the end of this month, he's going to have an assessment to determine the feasibility of doing a wireless educational network statewide. And so the thought process is on these towers, if we were to assist with these towers, then we would have at least 7 locations where there would be infrastructure, and we would be able to support and provide the space for that the statewide educational network, wireless educational network. And so you get two benefits. One, you get the immediate benefit of getting towers installed, now cell phone connectivity when the vendors deploy their resources on those. Citizens can get some connectivity in some of our extreme rural areas of the county. And then when the state wireless network for education comes on, our space is already reserved on there. And so our investment is really kind of twofold in that area. So that's the request that I have before you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Kelly, all of your requests meet the criteria I'm looking for bang for the buck, helps out a large part of the county, long-term infrastructure impacts that are really good. So my question, the amounts that you requested here, is that the max that you're able to handle? Or if we decided that, hey, we really want to make broadband a really big push, and we said we want to give more money than what you requested here, could you handle additional funds there?
So, I mean, more money is always good.
Right. I'm not saying that's what the commissioners
I
will
think
agree to.
I'm the same way. I'd like to see 100% coverage. Our county is, it's important to have this broadband coverage, not only because of the work we do here in this county, but in the case of another pandemic, if the schools again go into no classroom sessions, it'd be important to have everybody hooked up. And I think this is definitely an important CIP project as far as I'm concerned.
I agree.
And I know I talked to you earlier about the state has more money has come to them and they actually started their own department, rural band director. You know, Mr. Gordon is now the director of the state of Maryland, just established a few months ago. So obviously Maryland has an important issue here that they want to see it happen. So I'm all for whatever we can do to get everybody connectivity, if they want it, of course, to put it there and available to them.
So I would say that the last project, the towers, if the assessment comes back from the state that they are not going to do the wireless educational network, then I would ask for the flexibility to kind of redirect those funds to the last mile. And more funding for the last mile is good. With what I've requested here, the conversations that I've had with the state, with the additional funding that he has coming down, I would say that probably 3 years or 4 years out, if we continue the middle mile grants, and if I would say within 3 or 4 years, we would have the 98% coverage in our county. Wow. So more money to the middle mile, last mile categories here would accelerate that. But as I've spoken with Ms. Cudmore, I'm very cognizant of the other requests that are here and the challenges that as decision makers you have in allocating those funds.
Just a couple weeks ago, I was in Caroline County for a meeting with the board of directors of MECO. And one of the things that county has done, because it's very rural there, the electric co-op actually is taking charge and running broadband to every house in that county. Electric co-op.
You know, we've talked about that with SMETCO.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And the point has been, they said there's some interference that this can have, their lines can have. Is there a challenge in that regard, Mr. Kelly?
So those conversations that you started and initiated, Commissioner Hewitt, with SMECO, and I think the first couple of phone conversations I think you were a participant in, but they've continued, and we still have an active dialogue going along with SMECO. So, 10 or 15 years ago, 20 years ago, there was technology that seemed promising, doing internet over the power lines. And you're correct, Commissioner Hewitt, that really that technology didn't evolve or didn't develop into the high capacity, the broadband speeds that folks are expecting today. And so basically, Commissioner Guy, what's happening in the communities where the electric co-ops, they're just overlashing fiber. overlashing their power lines with fiber, which quite frankly is what we're doing with our projects here, right? I mean, it's just that Atlantic Broadband or Comcast, depending upon where you are in the county, they're installing their infrastructure on the telephone poles or in the ground, because SMECO has a huge project, and they're migrating a lot of their stuff underground, which makes our projects more expensive because now we have to go in the ground too.
Sure. Tell me, have we exhausted the grants coming from the state for this broadband?
Yes, and so a lot of the grants that the state has to receive to this date are actually federal grants. So it's federal money that comes to the state and then is allocated. And they're for specific projects. The challenge with a lot of those grants are they're looking at existing infrastructure and looking for those huge pockets where there's no infrastructure whatsoever. And again, because we've been concentrating on the middle mile and now migrating to the last mile, we don't have those pockets, so we're not eligible for those grants.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
More questions, Commissioners? No. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Very
Okay,
good.
thank you very much.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Commissioners, the next department is Recreation and Parks. Mr. Shepherd. And his request is $840,000.
And Mr. Shepherd's a cheap guy here.
Got a bargain.
Well noted. But yet this $840,000 for these three projects for the hardest hit communities and families, and they're in the sustainable community areas there in Lexington Park, as well as you know. One thing that the director did make a mistake on is the priority listing. When I did the memo that came back, I just put it as the third item, but actually the street and sidewalk restoration there at the Lexington Manor Passive Park, I'd like to flip that up to number one. That infrastructure is needed there. Talking with John Dietrich there, that's county highways from South Coral Drive leading out to Lay Drive to 235. That's not part of the Lexington Manor Park project, that's since it's a county highway, but that would get it on the county maintenance list. You'd get sidewalks, curbing, and a street, and that it's a major need if you saw the pictures that I showed you there on Coral and Lay. And as we're headed to construction being completed in September for the Lexington Manor Park. Restrooms up, demolition's about done, water's off the property, street lighting's, disc golf course repaired, new entrance, great partner. So that, having that county highways restored there would be very well. I'm looking at Carver too, that's part of the communities, as again, it meets the criterion sustainable communities as a one-time shot to, remember the elections came out, there's been some improvements there, but to make that a place that we could do additional programming, be there for the community, ADA accessibility, and possibly future use with our COOP plan, that's one that I'd like to see happen. And then finally, we're already going in the summer enrichment program. This original email, they started way back where we thought the American Rescue money would be allocated before, so we began that, utilizing space for adolescents that are at risk from 3 to 7 p.m. It's going very well. So that's a pilot program to see what we can use there between there, the pool, other field trips for. That's one of the things that wasn't on our calendar as much as summer. We have paid programs, but this here allows for those at-risk adolescents to be part of positive youth development programming in that community. That's it.
I want to thank you for working with the Board of Education. One of the things that we have talked about at this table before is we have all these school facilities that don't ever get utilized, and they're just sitting empty during the summer. And we have a lot of areas such as Lexington Park where we have to have positive youth development. And I think you've done a good job working with Jeff Burrell and Dr. Smith, Dr. Walker, et cetera, to be able to open that school up. And what we're basically doing, for everybody who doesn't know it, the 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock company Thursday, the kids can come in with positive youth development, play basketball, do other things, have guidance and stuff like that. One day a week, they go over to the swimming pool at Great Mills High School when it's all done. And it's really working out well. And I think that, like Art, you said, this is a pilot project that we hope to expand in Lexington Park to allow these kids to have something to do during the summer and enrich them versus them running around, getting in trouble.
Correct.
I would also add that I like the fact that we're as part of this pilot project, but it's also countywide, and that you're touching every single portion of the county with the fields, the playgrounds that are at the schools. We're actually using taxpayer dollars across the board versus, basically dividing the two and saying this is the school's money, this is our money. So great job.
Yeah, and I
Really.
appreciate partnership with the schools as well. Thank you.
And I think, Commissioner Guy, you were at Mako last week and saw.
We need to improve on that, Jim.
Make that to the crowd.
Because at Caroline County, they just had a dedication over there of their newest elementary school, which is capable of holding 850 students.
Wow.
We're talking about pre-K through fifth grade. But the odd thing I saw was part of the school was built with this huge gymnasium. I'm talking about a full court basketball court with 8 nets that came down. 6 of them went up and 2 of them stood up for a full court. And I said, well, no fifth grader's going to play on this. Well, it's not made for fifth graders. I said, what do you mean? They said, this is turned over to our Parks and Recreation Department, and they utilize it for their basketball programs. And then they had a full medical clinic that we're starting to get into now. But, of course, Caroline County has no hospital in the county. So all of their schools has this medical facility. But every one of them, and the superintendent of schools was there showing us around the school, every one of them, part of the school is actually turned over to Parks and Rec on the weekends and during the summer for their programs. And they, in turn, take care of cleaning, cutting grass or whatever at the parks and whatever, or at the fields outside. They even had several full tennis courts at a fifth grade school. And I go, tennis courts? They play tennis here? Well, not really. It's just for the recreation and parks to use. I thought, wow, what a partnership.
Dual
And they
use
were just
partnership.
very happy about that. And
imagine.
all their schools seem to be built to do that. And when I saw this full basketball court in elementary school, and even their cafeteria was a 3-line type cafeteria, and plus a huge area for the people. And I go, it looked like there's some adult type tables built up there. I said, well, we turn this over to our community to use as fundraisers or whatever on the weekend. And once again, Parks and Rec takes care of cleaning it up, or taking care of it, make sure it's maintained, how they do it. But I was just totally impressed, and we need to continue building on this relationship with our schools to open it up more to the public use at the same time. That's all my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Very rewarding to see it.
Passive Park. I'm excited about it. It's amazing. It's going to be gorgeous. This $640,000, this is for the sidewalks outside around the park? Is that what you were saying?
Okay, you're coming in off Great Mills Road on South Coral Drive.
Okay.
And then once we hit Tulagi Place, right in front of the Three Notch Theater,
Yes.
that's still county highway. That whole place is under disrepair. That's not part of the passive park. That's county highway. So I'm worked with DPW&T, but I'm asking for the funding to match it. So that roadway, the asphalt overlay, the reconstruction, the sidewalks that are there for accessibility, and then hitting Lay Drive and back down to
So would this
235.
impact the whole bus station and stuff too?
Could, all that walking infrastructure throughout that community. That's why I thought it was a great idea for the infrastructure, sustainable communities in the parks, egress, access to the park, because you're coming off both, and with accessibility, because that's what made me realize that in the end was how that needed to be improved, because people parking at Tulagi for big events and our property next to the post office, the accessibility now to where we have done the demolition and the new asphalt overlay, it doesn't meet the requirements to get there.
Yeah, it's effectively a private road that the county owns that connects from where the county, if you drive there, you'll see the sign end of county maintenance. So where correct, that Arthur stated that correctly, the Three Notch Theater and the homeless shelter are both on a private road that the county owns. And those were never built with those private roads. The curb is completely gone, deteriorated. There never was a stormwater, back to that theme again. There was no stormwater facility built in. It just, the water kind of ran down and found the low point. And the pavement's pretty well shot. It's possible to do an overlay in that existing pavement, but it probably wouldn't get much longevity, and the sidewalks that would still leave the sidewalks
Yes.
as a mess.
Would this be enough funding to do all you're talking about here?
Yes.
We did, yeah. That's based
Enough money
on
to do
the
all that?
cost, that estimate's based on the cost of Patuxent Park 5, which is essentially the same thing. We've got to completely replace the road and install sidewalks.
Okay. Okay, sounds reasonable. Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you all.
Thanks, Joan. Now we're done with the departments, and we're going to go into the sheriff's office, who's requesting $2.6 million. So I'm not sure who's coming up. Mary Ann? Thank you for coming up.
Good morning, everyone. Thank
Good morning.
You want to start with
Captain Hall.
your memo, Captain Hall?
Sure.
Thank you.
Commissioners, listed as priority one from the sheriff was a fully equipped mobile command response vehicle. I'm sure in that description you're getting some idea of what that is. What we're finding is, unfortunately, we are having several critical incidences happening simultaneously, sometimes within hours of each other. Serious incidents. We've also experienced a lot of recent weather events that require our response for road closures, flooding. Quoting Commissioner Colvin, I don't know that there's going to be a bigger bang for your buck than enhancing our ability to respond to these critical incidences. And every director and speaker, basically, that you've had up here this morning from the Board of Education, the Health Department, who you'll hear from, Parks and Rec, IT, DPW, we work in concert with just about every one of those department heads in one way or another, most recently in the pandemic, providing planning and security at the vaccination sites. This very simply will revolutionize our ability to respond and put resources where they need to be, and more importantly, pick up and go somewhere else at a moment's notice and provide that integrated command with fire, EMS, and our partners in emergency services.
Captain Hall, give me a visual of what this is. This like a big Winnebago, or I mean,
Basically, sir, it's a Winnebago.
Well, I'm sorry to make it that analogy, but it's
that's
like a big RV kind of vehicle that's all equipped inside.
Absolutely. And it's got the infrastructure inside without giving too much away, but it would provide everything from communications, interoperability, an actual command area for people to sit that represent each one of our respective partners in a critical incident, and most importantly, maybe a restroom. I mean, you can have
Look,
it.
I get it. My point to you is this. I like that last part. What's the difference between what you're doing now and what this would do for you? I mean, when you have, like, recently you had a shooting in Lexington Park, and then you had another one, like, I don't know, 20 minutes later, not long, somewhere else, a few miles away. I can see your point. So what do you do now? Everything goes to headquarters?
Well, sir, unfortunately, a lot of the times my peer, Captain Yingling, and I have to work off the trunks of cars or team up and get Chris Thompson from Emergency Services, who's helping us out getting fresh batteries and things like that. And we operate out of our own vehicles with two different radios and somebody scribing or taking notes of the incidences as things transpire in the back seat.
You need more people to do this?
Sir, this would actually provide us with a place to put people in the seats. We have the people, we just don't have a place to put them.
Yeah, makes sense. All right.
Sounds like a normal response for everything you got.
Well, I've learned from the best, sir.
You've had your share of challenges from Isaiah and all that business we have at all those road washouts and bridge washouts. And,
Yes, sir.
And then this shootings down in Lexington Park.
Protests.
You guys are stressed. I get it. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I hear Winnebago, and I immediately think Stripes and Bill Murray.
We will outfit this however you wish, Commissioner.
That's amazing. I love it. I love it. I know you have another list that's there, but there is some conversations that have been happening with the command staff, sheriff, in reference to safety and security. So I don't feel comfortable discussing those particular items based on the safety and security there, but maybe it's something we can get scheduled for executive session in order to discuss the overall parameters. And I'm sure Commissioner Morgan and I can brief our colleagues, but I do think there needs to be an allocation that's set aside in order to help you in your endeavors with the various locations throughout the county.
Yes, sir.
If you're not fully read up, which I'm sure you are, but either way, they got
Understood.
you. Okay.
Priority 2 is a renovation of the detention center visitation area. The visitation area was constructed back in 1989 before technology such as video visitation and before the detention center was doing so many alternatives to incarceration. This project is currently in the CIP. It's slated for FY 2024. We were hoping to be able to take and move that up so it would coincide with the current renovations of the detention center. And the renovations of this would take and it would provide a case management area, would provide a place to be able to do substance abuse counseling with the people in the lobby. It would be a place to be able to do urinalysis and safely be able to do that in our lobby area.
You don't have that ability with all this money we put into the, I mean, I'm not saying it negatively.
Right, no, we're very
But
grateful for everything.
We've done a lot over there with 26, 29, whatever $1 million it's spent. You don't have that now?
No, sir, we don't, because the
Wow.
lobby area, because we know the new addition we put on has a beautiful medical section. It'll have a place for our mental health counselors. It'll put on a new housing unit for our females to be able to do, but the public lobby, is circa 1989, so.
Again, I guess when I think about public lobby, I mean, someone wants to see a loved one or somebody in there, they just show up and say, I'm here to see John Smith, and what, I mean, I don't.
That's what happened back.
Could you put your microphone towards you? Thank you.
Sorry. So back in 1989, that's how it was done. You used to show up in the public lobby, and you would take in, we'd bring the inmates from the housing units up to visitation to be able to see people through the glass. However, since technology has increased, we were able to, during the pandemic, we were able to take and make sure that the inmates were still able to see there through video visitation and those kinds of things. So it's very, very popular with the families to be able to do the video visitation because you can do it from your homes, from your cars. I could do it sitting in this room if I chose to. So the video visitation really changed how the facility operated. It's much safer now. So, and people still have that interaction so that it's there.
I'm not trying to say I'm against it. I'm just surprised that with all the money we've put into that jail for, and that trailer and whatnot you have out front,
Right, the Community Corrections Center. Yes, sir. And we're so very grateful for all that, and it's providing
This isn't
alternatives.
somehow, wasn't included, that the visitation area wasn't somehow included in all that 27 million.
Right. And part of the needs assessment, I believe this was part of the needs assessment, at the time, and of course, county dollars only go so far, so, yeah.
Okay.
And we are truly grateful for everything.
Look, I'm not trying to criticize, I'm just
No.
surprised that it wasn't taken care of.
Oh, I have another list if you like, but no, I'm just teasing.
So would there be a benefit and economy of scale moving it up to do it while your construction is going on
Oh,
now?
yes, sir, because right now what'll happen is when they go in to fix the renovations for the security and for the air conditioning, we are already going to have to vacate out, so it would make a whole lot of sense to be able to do it simultaneously.
Yep.
The next one is the backup generator.
Contemplation and thought.
Oh, we're contemplating.
I'm reading that.
So priority 3 is the District 1 backup generator. As you know, the backup generator would be for the, up at the county line where the former visitor center is being renovated. County has put in monies to take and renovate that, but it didn't include a backup generator. So it would be very beneficial to be able to have that to have continuity of operations.
Just a question on that. Can you do me a favor? Beyond the backup generator, can you reach out to see if there's any way that we can get the battery-powered backup from Tesla that they have?
Okay.
This way, the generator is like a third wall. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. So
Redundant capability, oil and gas for the electric vehicle.
Right, yeah. So, you have the batteries that you can use for short term, and then the next option is the generator. Just having some conversations in the community if we're going to be doing something, it might be good to try and reach that goal. And I believe SMECO has some benefits to the county as well. So it's just something to explore.
I think that's a great idea because it is very much a historical spot there. So whatever we can do to make it sustainable for the future, I think that's great.
Great, appreciate it.
You want me to do 4? Now that we've moved, District 3 is now open. Crime Lab and our CID personnel have then moved and occupied that building. That's left a very large workspace that's not suitable for particularly my division, who doesn't have a home right now, so to speak. So we're asking for $500,000 to renovate that workspace to be able to provide office space, workspace for special operations, and I believe we're looking at some human resources and an office for the recruiter and things of that nature in that current work area. It was designed for that crime lab and CID space, I guess, right after the renovation when the temporary courthouse went defunct.
Sounds logical to me. Anything else? Question on? Move on to 5.
And priority 5 is the mental health personnel to provide them with Toughbook tablets, smart boards for our offender classrooms, the community corrections center conference room, and then tablets with the technology to have remote programs for the inmate population. One of the things we found during the pandemic is how very important technology is to our operations, and the Toughbooks would be to go to our medical and mental health so that they would have, could be able to enter information in real time, to be able to access the chart notes immediately. The smart boards, that's how education has gone, to be able to take and have a smart board to be able to pull up for programming purposes, educational purposes. And then the tablets, they would be to be able to issue to each inmate so they could use them to be able to keep in contact with their families through messaging, as well as for educational purposes.
Any questions, commissioners, on that? Sounds logical to that too, also. But
Okay.
we're turning these people back loose into the community. Should be can do to educate them and get them back in society.
Any questions? Thank you, Captain Hall.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you all very much.
All righty, now we're on to our first outside agency, Metcom, and they're requesting $10.6 million, and Mr. George Erickson is here.
Mr. Erickson, good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. I don't want to be your most expensive guy. This is a list of
You are
eligible.
the expensive guy. What do you
This
think?
is a list of eligible projects, not necessarily our request. I think the call for eligible projects was what we were asked to do. It's just actually
They numbered as priorities here?
right. That's why we changed those and put them in priority order. And if I could digress just for 1 second on the DPWT topic, we were talking about the I&M agreement. So Dave Weiskopf was the issue with. I can put my former hat on. There's a third party that actually inspects all these maintenance facilities, stormwater management maintenance facilities, and they give you a deficiency report. Metcom has received those deficiency reports. That's why I'm comfortable talking about that today. What it basically says is these are the things wrong with your stormwater management facility. You need to get them fixed. If we chose not to do that, 2 years later, we'd get another deficiency report, probably listing the same items. I think what's lacking, and I forget which commissioner said it, I think it might have been even Commissioner Hewitt, there's no real enforcement mechanism in those I&M agreements. You got to pay a contractor to do the work. Someone's got to pay the contractor to do the work. If the community is not doing the work, eventually your facility is going to fail. So the only way to do it is to perform the work, and then, I hate to use the word excise, extract that out of them, not necessarily in the form of a special taxing district, but somehow make the I&M agreement more binding to those successors. DPW has never had a supportable mechanism for enforcement. The responsibility is clear, but the enforcement part is lacking. I just wanted to throw that little piece of support out for my peer over there sitting behind me today. Anyway, again, this is a clarification. This is just a list of eligible projects. The way we read the funding request, there seemed to be an emphasis for water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure, so that's why we listed a lot of projects here. Projects 4 through 8, they're already programmed in our capital improvement budget. They're already part of the debt capacity calculation, the combined capacity calculation. Obviously, if grant monies can be obtained, you increase your ability to incur additional debt. Despite our recent legislative success with House Bill 862, where we both can incur additional debt, anytime you cannot borrow, it's a good thing. But I would argue today that numbers 4 through 8 are in our CIB. They're programmed, they're methodically scheduled out, and they don't necessarily need to be part of your support today. Item number 9. It's low on the priority list, but I just wanted to bring this to the Commissioner's attention. It's called the lead and copper rule. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the EPA just came up with a new lead and copper rule. There are revisions to the rule on January 15th, 2021. What that basically says is the local utility is responsible for locating and finding every lead and copper pipe, whether it's public or private. This includes every house connection. We have to make a physical inventory to identify the material type. Then the local utility is also required to do what? To provide the funding mechanism for those individuals to replace their lines,
comply with that rule,
track it, and be responsible for compliance within a certain period of time. So that's a heavy burden. We understood on the public side that makes a lot of sense, but also the responsibility would be passed over on the private side. The reason this is number 9, even though it sounds like it should be elevated higher, they're still kicking this around, but it has some long-term implications. The bottom line is we know we're going to have to do an inventory at some point in time. So this was the seed money to start doing the inventory. It's not a high priority. Items number 10, 11, and 12 are very low priority, and they're fairly self-explanatory. So I would like to just focus on our numbers 1, 2, 3, the gold, silver, and bronze medals. First one is St. Clement Shores Wastewater Treatment Plant. You know, we've been building on a lot of momentum. Even through COVID, we were able to get consensus with the state. Thank you, Commissioners, for passing your amendments to the Comprehensive Water and Sewer Plan and the Comprehensive Plan. I think that was the first resolution that you did this year in 2021. I think it was 2021-01, so it was the first thing you did this year. We didn't wait for that to happen before we started our preliminary engineering evaluation. Our preliminary engineering report has now been finalized with the cost estimate. What the state requires prior to giving you funding, we have to submit our funding request this fall, is an engineering analysis of 3 or 4 different alternative technologies. They make you go through that to make sure you're doing the best for this particular location, and it's a proven technology. So we submitted that already to the state. We're going to wait to hear back from the state. What is critical with this is they will tell us eligibility for funding. There's some bay restoration funds available for this project. We are supplementing that with loans. Our commissioners put another $2.5 million in 2022 in anticipation for what this ENR cost is going to be. Our consultants, as consultants do, they are recommending a 25% contingency for a lot of reasons. So when you're dealing with a project that's 10 to 12 million, 25% is a couple $1 million. Our funding request has to match our CIB. Our CIB has to match our application, so we're trying to get all these in line. So our request on St. Clement Shores is to provide an additional $2.6 million of supplemental grant funding. If we don't need it, that's great. Our commissioners can back off on the reserves, or we can borrow less money from the state.
Ms. Erickson,
Yes, sir.
before you move on, strongly support your St. Clement Shores wastewater treatment plant. Something I've been working on for quite a while. We'll tell you that hopefully we'll be meeting with Secretary Grumbles and Lee Curry at the MACO conference here in a few weeks. Would be nice if you have the time, or whoever the appropriate agency is, to provide us some kind of update as to where we are now, where we need to go. By that meeting, of course, this decision will be made. I'm not saying it will be funded or it won't be, but it would be nice to know where we are with that, and have we taken any bay restoration money yet, that type of idea, because that was something we started about 5 years ago. And it's been an ongoing project, so prior to that meeting, which is, I think, August, it's
Right.
it's August 18th through the 21st.
Hopefully, we'll know before then.
I agree, but if you could give us some kind of an update, I'd appreciate it.
Would the board like to see the preliminary engineering report? So you can talk a little more technical than you normally could? Would you like
This
to see that?
commissioner would, but I'm not speaking
Well,
for other commissioners.
We'll send it through the county administrator's
Right, right.
office, and
Send
we'll
it to
give you
everybody.
7 copies, and you can
That'd be good.
distribute it however you want. We'll do that.
Appreciate it.
Great.
Ms. Cudmore, with this grant funds, is there a time limit on when they need to be used? And would you be able to meet that time with this project?
Right.
Twofold.
Yes. go
Twofold
ahead.
question. It's 2 to 5 years. The key here is we have to have the funding in place for the application this fall. So from a cash flow standpoint, absolutely not. I would put it in 2023 if I was a county commissioner, but we can't put it in 23 because we have to have the authority to expend when we submit the application. That's the crux of this. Otherwise, absolutely great question. It would be 2023 in a heartbeat.
No, that's important, that whole thing about September. I was familiar with that. Yeah.
Yes, sir. The second one, we just finished our EPA-required risk and resiliency assessment. We had 15 projects that were prioritized. I don't want to go, I'm sensitive to Mr. O'Connor's release of certain information, especially when it's risk associated. We have about 68 water wells and over 30 storage tanks. 5 water wells and 4 storage tanks were found to be particularly at high risk for intentional contamination. That's a vulnerability thing, and we'd like to address that and not wait for a CIB cycle. It fits very well into the model as far as funding goes, as far as funding eligibility goes. The purpose of these smart sensors would be to immediately detect and notify us regarding any type of well contamination in these communities. And it's also based on areas served. It's not just, every life matters, but it's not just a community where there are 2 or 3 people tied into a well. These are little larger communities, and we want to be particularly responsive with respect to this particular item. This was not on our list the first time, back in, I think it was May, when we first submitted. It was not on our list because we didn't have our risk and resiliency assessment back. So we think this is a really critical number 2 priority. It's not a lot of money, but it's something that we can put in instantaneously if the funding is approved.
Okay. Good.
The third item is near and dear to DPW's heart as well as our heart. Down on Golf Course Drive, we have a lot of, I don't know if you're familiar with what saddles are. You basically have your water line and you have a saddle that sits on top. It's basically the individual line connection. There's a valve associated with it as well. Back in the 60s, or early 70s, when Wicomico Shores was put in, it was infrastructure that Metcom didn't put in. They put in substandard non-coated steel saddles. They have started to deteriorate because the soil up there is highly erodible. And if I would say 1 a week for about a month, that wouldn't be underestimating what happened up there. We've got about 120 more connections. What's happening in the community is it's one thing to turn off the water today. It's another thing to turn off the water next week. It's another thing when it starts going on and on and on. I won't say you lose your reputation, but you lose a little credibility if you can't just fix the problem, because people only see their water off and on. We have this issue, with temporary patches and permanent patches, and we're trying to schedule DPW to overlay the roadway. The best way to handle this, and again, these are 120 individual connections, it's to ensure they have safe supply of water. They need to be stainless steel or brass. It's going to cost us about $720,000 to do this. It's not something in our operating budget, which is how we've been handling these mini crises. We need to get in there, get it done, finish it, overlay the road, and get out of Wicomico Shores. So that's why that is our number 3 priority.
I like it.
And the other items, Commissioners, open any questions you have or any additions that you might see from the Commission. And again, we apologize for it being $10 million, but the idea was eligible. And you asked us subsequently to prioritize, which is a really good idea. So we offer up our 1, 2, and 3 at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
this lead and copper rule, I mean, most homes here, I think, have copper piping throughout the house. Well, I mean, maybe recently it's gone to plastic more, but my house was built 20 years ago, and it's all copper throughout the entire house. How dangerous is this copper piping in a house?
I would Google, that's all you have to do, the lead and copper rule. Give yourself a brief read. You only have to read a couple of paragraphs.
Oh, no, I don't want to read it.
It's the onerousness of having to address every single house connection and be responsible for the funding mechanism of it and ensuring that it gets done. What arm do we have that you won't hear complaints about when we force ourselves upon them and force ourselves to get it done and force them to pay for it in a certain time frame?
Wow.
No different than the stormwater management ponds, you know. Potable water is a little bit probably more important, I would say, than stormwater management. That's my version, obviously, of it, but nonetheless equally as invasive when it comes to enforcement.
So we're waiting to see what EPA
Only
says?
people in your system.
That is correct.
So two-thirds of the county has another whole problem that they will never know about unless they go get themselves inspected to find out if they got a problem.
And we have to do that inspection. So you're talking about 16,000 to 18,000 connections. And
wow,
it only takes a petition from 24 people to have you send it our way or Dietrich's way or Dave's way. It doesn't take a lot, but 18,000 is plenty.
So, sorry, I'm getting confused here. Are you going to have to do these inspections for only current Metcom customers or for every resident's house in the county?
Residents tied into the public system.
Okay.
Not their private wells.
Yeah.
But it's a great
But I'd be
follow-up
concerned.
question.
I'd be concerned to see if my copper pipes are poisoning my family.
Great follow-up question. If there's a big
Wow.
enough urgency for this, from a public safety standpoint, why not also those on
Every
private
house in the
well?
county. Yeah.
Let's not say that very loudly.
Not yet. No panic everybody yet.
It's too late. It's too late. But probably the most important would be the public systems.
Any other questions, Commissioners?
No, but that ties in well with the health department, too.
That sure does, yeah.
And I'll send you a little briefing on the lead and copper rule along with the St. Clement Shores.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, George.
And the last is from the Health Department, Dr. Brewster. And we actually received an updated presentation this morning. I believe the numbers are the same.
This is another one from the one we already got?
Oh, you might already have it.
No, I think earlier.
Oh, the
we got
updated one? I got the updated one.
The health one.
Okay.
No, we haven't gotten this.
No, okay. This is the updated.
Oh, okay. The one that has July 13th on it? I got mine.
I just added in a little bit of explanation, that's all.
There's another one?
Yeah.
Thank
This
you.
is with the grant funds. The one we got earlier was the Board of Health presentation.
Oh, no, I knew that,
This
but
is
I
the
thought
one.
I had
Did you
this.
distribute that? This is the one I was provided to by Sharon. I believe this is it right here.
The recovery for COVID-19 pandemic? Okay, great. There's two slide sets because there's a Board of Health slide set as well. That was
Okay.
sent.
Welcome, Dr. Brewster.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you so much for your time today. And I'm joined by Captain Yingling from the Sheriff's Office, as a couple of the components we'll talk about are actually mutual initiatives between the Sheriff's Office and the Health Department. Our total request for these funds, component on slide 3, is really it's difficult to predict the future, but as we will discuss a little bit later in our Board of Health meeting, we're not out of this pandemic yet, and with lagging vaccination rates across the country and world, we will be likely dealing with COVID for at least some time to come. We're hopeful because at least with half of our local population vaccinated and the related decline in community cases and community spread that we've been seeing over the past several weeks, we are ready to wean back some of our surge response operations. At our peak, we had brought on 150 contractual staff on top of the health department size that had already been repurposed to address COVID. This budget request for fiscal year '22 drastically decreases our surge operational response for fiscal year '22, and then further decreases it for fiscal year '23, at which point we hope to sunset our contractual surge response for COVID. We do need to maintain this level of some readiness and ongoing surge response to help us get to a point of recovery here locally. We are continuing to offer community testing, including our rapid PCR capability, and will likely expand that testing capability as we start in-person school in the fall. We are continuing to offer community members vaccine, and will likely expand those efforts yet again when the under 12 population becomes eligible and as we receive guidance on what kind of booster dose scheduling would be needed. We're continuing to be the main key source of information about the COVID pandemic and local implications for our public and our partners. And we are continuing to do surveillance and data analysis that our community has come to rely upon. We've decreased our data updates to exclude weekends, but we are continuing to monitor, and especially continuing to monitor, variant viruses and breakthrough cases and how they may tie to different vaccines. We are continuing to do contact tracing and managing outbreaks and providing outreach to our most vulnerable population. However, we will plan on doing it on a much reduced scale for this fiscal year and even less for the following. So again, we're scaling back significantly, but we do have some ongoing COVID surge response needs to maintain this year and next fiscal year. The next slide, on slide 4, starts to outline our second component of the request. It is the largest chunk of our request. It is focused on recovery and building a sustainable, long-term infrastructure to support health and public safety that we will rely upon, as I mentioned, for decades to come. Commissioners, as you recall, a couple months ago, we had come before you to relay the information and to recognize the generosity of PNC Bank, who had donated for this county's use their $1.5 million estimated facility. That building was donated to our community expressly for the purpose that it be used to address the large gap that we have in behavioral health crisis stabilization services, and also to support our ongoing pandemic response, most significantly through COVID testing. And the component 2 of this budget, goal 2, is intended to leverage that private contribution into a behavioral health crisis system infrastructure for our county. It will help us build community resilience, address the underpinnings of community violence, and be a critical place for medical services, including behavioral health clinical services in this community. It reflects a strong local tradition of partnership, most notably between the Sheriff's Office and the Health Department, and the collaboration between the public safety and public health sectors, but absolutely involving multiple partners and sectors across this community to address a lot of these underlying reasons for a variety of disparities that we see in our community. So, again, this is why our Sheriff's Office team and Health Department team are working together on this initiative, and I'm sure Captain Yingling here can speak a little bit more as to why we need it. If you move to slide 5, that's really just pointing to some of the underlying reasons and the rationale for why this behavioral health crisis stabilization system would be so critical for our community moving forward. And I don't know if Captain Yingling, if you wanted to talk a little bit about what you're seeing on the public safety side in terms of violence and so forth that may be reflecting some underlying issues with mental health and substance use.
Obviously, we are experiencing a rash of shootings in and around St. Mary's County. Lexington Park Youth Gun Task Force is working diligently to address those issues, and we're working collaboratively with our partners in that initiative to address the causes of youth gun violence. We are, especially since the pandemic, seeing an increase in mental health calls for service a lot of communities have, people in the community have been cut off from their primary care providers due to the effects of COVID. The emergency evaluations and check the welfares and mental health calls, roughly about 3,200, 4,000 calls a year, continue to increase at a very rapid pace. If you remember several weeks ago, I was before you guys talking about our co-responder initiative. This ties in directly with that for the grant application, which is going to be a big undertaking. So there's funding for police in here as part of our collaborative effort to address those problems.
So going back to the Youth Gun Task Force, you just brought up, is this, I see how there's an attempt to rationalize that with mental health, but from my understanding, this is more of a bunch of kids with guns shooting each other up more than it being a mental health issue. If I understand what the Youth Gun Task Force is talking about, I haven't heard yet from anybody over there it's a mental health issue. It seems to be more of a youth issue, gun issue, gang issue, drug issue, et cetera.
For the most part, you are correct. There are definitely, primarily that is a gun violence problem. What I'm talking about is, one, the causes of that. That's the diversion. That's working with the school system to the glamorization of the gun lifestyle and that kind of stuff. So when I talk about Youth Gun Task Force and those partners, that's us working with the health department, that's us working with St. Mary's County Public Schools, that's us working with the NAACP and a collaborative effort there, Commissioner. When we talk about mental health response and co-responder and the increase in calls for mental service, we do respond to people with mental illness who have access to firearms, who we are in barricade situations that we are dealing with. And so part of the Mobile Crisis Initiative is to go and have clinicians who have more experience than a police officer to help assess and do early interventions in those to break that cycle of mental illness. So not necessarily mutually exclusive.
Okay, thank you.
I think there's a dividing line that needs to be made between a mobile crisis intervention team and a co-responder unit.
Mm-hmm.
Two separate, completely different things.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Ours is a behavioral health response unit.
Right, and the mobile crisis intervention, our emergency services department needs to be involved in this, because the reason it's so successful in other locations is because it's not law enforcement centric. And the people actually have access to those services knowing that it's not law enforcement centric. So the fear of not the mobile crisis portion is that they can go there and they can deal with the crisis and not have to worry about the law enforcement side of it, whereas the co-responder is there. And that's why our emergency services being involved, Mr. Walker, is so important, because they're also available for our fire and EMS. So, and the other thing I'm concerned with this is not creating FTEs, because there's a company that does this contractually for multiple counties in the state. It's already established, it's already done. So there's no reason to create FTEs for the mobile crisis response. But I think it's not who's running it, but because it is run out of the health department in all of those locations, but I think it needs to be addressed in a different way. So that's the only concern I have with the mobile crisis response.
So I'll be talking about that in a moment. Is it okay if we talk a little further on it then?
No, that's fine, because I heard the co-responder unit come up, so I was looking at the slide.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. All right.
I appreciate your comments. So really, the investment that we're asking for has a significant return on investment associated with it. When we talk about diverting from the emergency department, diverting from jail time for things that can be addressed as underlying health issues are addressed, we're talking about leveraging this investment into future grant dollars, and I'll talk more about that when I talk about sustainability. So Commissioner Colvin, you mentioned whatever gets you the greatest bang for your buck. Well, this will get you bang and buck for your buck. And so we have a great opportunity to acquire multiple different sources of funding if we establish a level of capacity here in the county for behavioral health crisis stabilization. Our department has applied for 4 different grant funding streams. in the past handful of years, we've been denied for those grant funding streams because we don't have some level of capacity built up. And those funds have gone to jurisdictions that have some level of capacity to help build and expand their capacity. So if we can invest in the capacity and establish a level of capacity and demonstrate the outcomes, we have plenty of funding resources that are available to us that we will secure to help maintain to sustain these efforts in the long run. And then, of course, when you're talking about saving lives and averting injury, that has an incredible return on investment that probably isn't even measurable, really. If you go to the next slide, this is the behavioral health crisis system model that's nationally recommended. There are 3 core elements. Our proposal here would implement element 2 and 3. We cut out element 1 from the proposal that we had put forward a couple weeks ago. I'll go through each of these 2 units, to each of these 2 elements. Slide 7 are one-time funds to get the facility ready for operations. This is critical. We cannot operate out of a facility that has carpet and asbestos and space. We need to renovate the interior of the facility in order to make it a space that will accommodate 16 hours a day of clinical services, 6 days a week to start, and more in the future when we want to get to a place of 7 days a week and hopefully 18 plus hours a day.
This is mainly the PNC building?
Yes, this is the PNC building.
2.4.
So a big part of that is equipment. So clinical supplies, clinical equipment, office supplies, office equipment that we'll need to get it ready. Those are one-time expenses that will get us ready for operating out of that facility.
That gets you this capacity issue you're talking about?
Yes, that will help us with capacity. They also want to see that we've tried to implement the services, and that's the next part that I'll talk about in a moment. Phase 1 and 2 of renovations to this building are ones that would help us in the immediate future. Phase 1 is renovation of the drive-through, as you may have seen. That has already started. If you are able to support the cost of that project through these one-time funds, we can repurpose the grant funds we were using for that project towards maintaining operations beyond the life of the ARPA funds. Phase 2 costs would cover the interior demolition and build-out of what's happening inside the building, again, to make it into a medical and rehabilitation facility that's functioning 6 days a week and at least 12 to 16 hours a day. That includes the cost of constructing a lab, building out all the patient exam rooms and counseling rooms, and having the appropriate safety and security measures in place in the building, given the populations and programs that we're operating out of this facility. The next slide, slide 8, is the aspect of behavioral health crisis field unit. That is one of the 3 critical elements of what's recommended nationally for communities when they're developing behavioral health crisis stabilization systems. The behavioral health crisis field unit, we're proposing a co-responder model. We've done ride-alongs. We have spoken with other jurisdictions that are doing this model. There's a lot of national examples of a co-responder unit. And talking with mental health clinicians, they want their their safety to be addressed when they're responding to these potentially volatile situations in the community. And they are very encouraged by the prospect of having a partnership with law enforcement to ensure the stability and safety of the scene so that they can focus safely on the behavioral health assessment and stabilization and transport of the individuals involved in a community setting.
Captain, do you have those deputies on board to do this now?
No. This would be additional FTEs is what we're talking about.
Contractual.
Contractual cops?
Contractual, you could look at retired, you could look at building out. Remember, what I told you last time and what I'm going to continue to tell you is every time you see me, I'm going to track you down and try to talk to you about a co-responder unit. So if you don't want to talk about co-responder, you should run from me. The highlight of the co-responder program is the partnership, the training, the working together every day to deal with what are extremely difficult cases for law enforcement, and it is a huge win to have a partner with a higher level of training than me to make some of those tougher calls, to make those decisions as far as whether someone needs to be taken into custody or not. From a risk standpoint, the emergency evaluations and taking people who need treatment for mental illness, they have a higher propensity for violence. Currently, a lot of our follow-ups are done with Southern Maryland Community Networks and our behavioral health coordinator. I remember sitting in a meeting and we getting a frantic call from one of the providers who they've been trying to reach somebody who needs mental health services. They've tried letters, they've tried phones, and so they go out to meet with them by themselves, and they're going to knock on the front door and they see an axe protruding through the front door. And so they did the smart thing. They backed out, and the person inside was going through one of our consumers was going through a very manic situation. And so, but imagine if they hadn't looked at the axe coming through. And so I am committed, Sheriff Cameron is committed to serving this community, to addressing this, and so we're looking at it at a multi-tiered way of approaching this. So one, staff, full-time staff, expertly trained, working day in and day out with those personnel. Two, overtime, CIT trained personnel. That's the grant that you gave us authorization to apply for to fill in those situations. Obviously, that's little less, but that's not your money. And to quote Bob Kelly, who's a very wise man, more money is better than less money. And then number three, by filling it inside. And so that's the least beneficial. That would be putting a mental health clinician in a car. And so in addition to going to mental health calls, they get to go to thefts and other calls for service as they're kind of hotboxing between patrol deputies. But the pro to this type of program is significant.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I will again reiterate, in working with our behavioral health community and our clinical community, as they should be, they are very concerned about their own safety when they're responding to potential volatile situations in the community. And while they have all the training and responding to crisis, and you can give them some level of protective training, there is a level of assurance that comes with partnering with law enforcement in those critical incidents. In the next slide, slide 8, slide 9 is the next component of goal number 2, which is creating and operationalizing that crisis receiving and stabilization facility. So so this is open to anybody. So anybody in the community can walk in to a crisis receiving and stabilization facility. They can bring their child, they can bring their spouse and say, I need help and I don't know where to go. And any primary care doctor or hospital or urgent care in the community has one place then that they can send their patients, so they're not confused and discouraged in navigating all the different resources that they may find difficult to navigate for their patients, and send their patients to one place where they can get an immediate assessment, get stabilized, and then have a very warm transition, where like a warm handoff is what we call it, where you are coordinating very closely with your private sector treatment partners and you are transferring care into those settings as appropriately, where they've already had some level of stabilization and they can move into immediate treatment in that private sector. This is a critical place for people to be able to walk into. It's a critical place for our first responders, including our EMS and law enforcement, to bring patients to or clients to. It's a critical place for our community partners and healthcare providers to be able to send their patients and clients to. I can't overemphasize the importance of having the comprehensive services that we need to implement in this type of facility. So this, for fiscal year 22 and 23, will focus on capacity building. As I'll talk about in a moment, we have identified a mechanism for sustainability. These would be contractual staff, and again, we have a mechanism for sustainability. It involves a multidisciplinary team, including psychiatric expertise, behavioral health counselors, and others.
Dr. Brewster,
Yes, sir.
did I miss the mobile crisis intervention portion?
That was the field response unit, sir.
Okay, so
That was slide 8.
I've said it multiple times in multiple meetings, and where there's a separation of the co-responder and mobile crisis intervention. So the co-responder unit is a program that's deployed throughout the state in various different agencies where you have an individual that's riding for active calls. And I'll use the example of the SAM 800 unit in Prince George's County. It's run out of the health department. It is mobile crisis intervention. There's no law enforcement officer that goes with them. And we're on scene, and we have somebody that's suffering from mental illness. So we have a co-responder unit that's out there already doing what they're doing. But we get on scene, and let's say it's whatever mental illness, and we say, we need a SAM 800 unit. Talk to them on the phone. The officer remains on the scene, if necessary, and they show up, and they intervene in that crisis moment. Then there's the other ones where they're actually, citizens can call and say, hey, look, my brother's suffering from a mental breakdown. The mobile crisis unit arrives on scene. They assess the situation. If they need law enforcement, they get on their county-issued radio, and they say, hey, I need a law enforcement officer to respond. And then we come out there. The reason for doing this is it expands the capabilities in which you can provide mobile crisis response. The fire department is tied into this. The EMS is tied into it. The hospital is tied into it. So that's what I mean by non-law enforcement centric. And they are contractual providers that they actually go after the grants themselves. They partner with the agencies. I've watched this work for 12 years. With one of the most violent counties in the entire state of Maryland, aside from Baltimore City, these practitioners are going to the homes, and they're not having these issues. And we're far from the most violent county, So what I would like to see is both of these happen, because it can be run through a contractor, and we can provide a deeper level of mental health services, which provides a nexus for law enforcement to get involved. But at the same time, I don't want to digress where somebody is in a mental health situation and we move back to the 50s where the police are there and they're getting committed because they think mental health is now police.
Yeah,
so
so
that's one of the issues I have.
Thank you, Commissioner. And actually, I did include a request for funding of that, what you're describing, in the original budget request I submitted a few weeks ago. And based on the request to whittle down our request, we removed that component. If you would like, I'd be happy to reinsert that in the request. It would have been a contractual mechanism that was medication enabled to do medication and stabilizing in the field.
Well, I think I'm not looking for medication and stabilization. What I'm looking for is the mobile crisis intervention. So that I would support putting back in there for a contractual basis with somebody that's already doing it.
We can insert that back in, and we can look at it a little bit further. I will like to say, just from my experience in riding along in Prince Williams, and then of course talking with the health officers in other jurisdictions, that the initial response with law enforcement has incredible value. And while I understand, the points that you're raising, and I understand the mechanism that you're also describing as being distinct from that, there are a variety of calls that law enforcement will be able to arrive at first on the scene. And if they're accompanied with a very capable mental health clinician who is able to do the assessments and stabilization in the field, you can then avert emergency petitioning somebody that really doesn't need to be EP'd. You can then bring somebody to that behavioral health stabilization and receiving facility after they've had some initial assessment in the field to get ongoing connection into care. Or you can do follow-ups on that, and they can remain in their home setting, depending on whatever the situation is and whatever stability that behavioral health clinician is able to provide in the field. Again, I'll just reiterate, from a behavioral health clinician perspective, when you are responding to potentially volatile situations, it can be incredibly helpful to have a partnership and trust built with your partner in law enforcement in that response.
I totally support the two. I don't want to get the two confused. So that's why, yeah, I totally support the co-responder and having the clinician in the vehicle. And I also 100% support the mobile crisis intervention practitioners that are available for citizens to contact, that are also available for law enforcement to contact, and fire and EMS. So they're two separately very, very distinct things.
And
I don't want to get the two confused, because I absolutely support the co-responder. I'm writing a grant for the co-responder, so I think it's amazing to have. So I don't want any confusion on that. I just want more mental health.
Thank you so much. No, appreciate that attention, and I'd be happy to reinsert that into our budget request. The next is the slide 10, which reviews sustainability. And again, just to go back to Commissioner Colvin's point, I know these are limited funds, limited time period, but we're creating infrastructure that has long-lasting impact. And that focus on capacity building in a couple years allows us to establish the mechanisms to sustain the work, in addition to all the one-time expenses that we've put forward here. The first part really is the mechanisms for sustainability are twofold. One, giving a couple years of us to operationalize, to recruit, to put into place protocols, and to get licensed, right, as we need to get licensed through the state system in order to bill, allows us to establish billing mechanisms. Not everything in behavioral health crisis stabilization services are billable services, but if you do it the right way, you can get the most you can out of it to offset the costs of continued operations. In addition, we'll be operating primary care or some level of primary care services from this facility, and the mechanism for billing for primary care is much better established than the mechanism for behavioral health, and we're hoping that providing that service in this facility will allow us to also offset some of the cost of things that are not billable under the behavioral health mechanism. As I mentioned, there are a variety of federal and state grants that really want to support us, but they want to support us once we have established a level of capacity and demonstrated that we have a commitment from our community to put this into place. We are leveraging all these dollars that we're requesting here that could be invested in this to gather more dollars in the future. Every investment that you choose to make to support this initiative will help us secure additional funding. In addition, when we go for the Phase 3 renovation of the building, which the Housing Authority is seeking support from private foundations to support, we can include all this investment as a demonstration, and so that the private foundation is much more likely to fund more to support the longer-term, larger capital renovation cost. And so you basically stack all the investments that you've made thus far for operations, for intermediate renovations, et cetera, and then the private foundations offer more to support to offset the cost of the larger renovation picture. That would take years down the road. We are accustomed to grant-funded contractual staff. The majority of our budget at the health department are grant funds. We operate and we offer grant funds. We hire contractual staff all the time. In fact, I mentioned we hired nearly 150 of them, and we just let go of several dozen as we are weaning down our surge response. We are accustomed to hiring grant-funded or contractual positions, and we feel we will be able to successfully do that in order to begin operations for this here. We have also demonstrated, I believe, a capacity to leverage these initial investments into greater dollars. As you recall, we spent $1.5 million of CARES funding to build 2 school-based health centers, and within a couple months, we turned around a $650,000 grant that this county was receiving based on that initial $1.5 million investment. So again, not just bang for the buck, but bucks and bang for the buck on this. And then in addition to all the savings that we'll gather and the improved quality of life and lives saved.
Dr. Brewster,
Yes, sir.
Going back, the crisis call center hotline, is there any particular reason that you removed that from the tier step process?
My understanding was we were asked to, and I may have misunderstood, but my understanding we were asked to decrease our budget request to about that 10 million mark, and I may have misunderstood. So, okay, all right. So I may have misunderstood, but that's part of why we eliminated that. But that would have been the third component of a comprehensive system.
All right, and then what was the initial cost? I mean, it's probably in one of the other.
I don't recall off the top of my head, but I think it was about $500,000.
Okay, because that, when we're talking grants and we're talking mental health and crisis intervention, one of the biggest things that we've seen is contracting out of the area for those types of services.
Yeah, and we've looked into that. In fact, as I mentioned, we've applied for 4 different grants over the past handful of years. And as we've applied for those grants, we've contacted a variety of companies that contract for these services in other jurisdictions. And we haven't been able to thus far find one that provides the satisfactory level of service we want and is willing to do it here in St. Mary's County.
Well, that's the problem I have with it, is that it's not centric to St. Mary's County. Right now, you have the suicide hotline, you have the veteran suicide hotline, you have Safe Call Now, you have, rather than one number that we can advertise in St. Mary's County that coincides with co-responder unit, mobile crisis, the health department.
Exactly.
Emergency services being able to triangulate, do whatever it is they do to go ahead and figure out where this person is. We don't have that here. We lost that some time ago.
Yeah,
when
and
there was a
I
shutdown.
would say that wasn't, that was there to some level, and it addressed certain concerns, but it wasn't a comprehensive hotline crisis system response, call center, essentially. We would be very committed to making that operational. I was also cognizant of the 2-year period of time that we have with these funds and what could realistically be accomplished within those 2 years, and also trying to prioritize the requests we were making. The call center is in our future. We cannot have a comprehensive behavioral health crisis stabilization system for this county without that third nationally recommended element. We will need that. I was just trying to focus on the other 2 elements that I felt we could get off the ground immediately, and that would then build the capacity to allow us to get the grant funding and establish the billing mechanisms that would help support other components down the road.
And I know this has been a lengthy discussion on all these topics, so I don't want to belabor the lengthy conversations already, but the key for me here with this crisis call center is that, when I want to get in touch with somebody up the road, I literally say, what's the citizen number for mobile crisis? They get it. There's somebody that's on call that has a cell phone. The citizens can call that number and they get the on-duty practitioner. For law enforcement, there's a privatized number and we call that. So that is important. While it might not be a call center, it is somebody that is on call to go ahead and answer. And really, I don't know that you're successful in your co-responder or those ventures if you don't have the ability to have somebody, even on a minimal scale.
Yeah. Well, and, similar to the model that we visualized in Prince Williams County when we went and did our site visit there, their mental health clinicians are on call. And we would have our mental health clinicians on call as well. We run a 24/7 on-call system for the health department. We've done that for years for environmental health emergencies, for healthcare providers to call if they have a certain infectious disease. And we would be looking to, as feasible as we could. You have to look at limited staffing and what you can ask people to do when you're doing 24/7 call coverage. But we would be looking for some level of a response for those mental health clinicians to be on call. So in the Prince William example, those mental health clinicians, their number was out there with law enforcement, with EMS and so forth. And so they could get a phone call, or their agency that they worked with was facilitating that call service. But I agree. I think ultimately where we need to get to is having a 24/7 coordinating call center that would be available to not just the private citizen, but then to community partners, first responders, healthcare providers, et cetera. I just was really trying to focus in on how we can build capacity to then obtain the funds down the road that would help us build those other elements.
Yeah, and I think you'll see it getting a lot bigger down there in Prince William, especially with Chief Davis coming from the experience, between Anne Arundel and Prince George's, I think.
And they just doubled the size of their unit.
Yeah.
And
Yep, their co-responder unit.
Frederick City Police has just stood up a new unit that incorporates EMS that we're going to do a day trip to go get a brief out on their program. So that's in our near term.
Cool.
Yeah,
Good
this,
stuff.
You make some excellent points, Commissioner, about distinctions and the need across the board. And I think, this is one way to get started so that we can bring in some grant dollars to help us with the other elements. The last component on slide 11 is about school-based behavioral health. And we have established with the school system for the past handful of years, we contract funds over to the school system to support behavioral health, crisis intervention, and prevention counselors. They are not doing billable behavioral health clinical services. They're doing prevention and crisis intervention type services. There's a dedicated behavioral health clinician in each high school and middle school now because of those funds that we then contract over to the school system. Our proposal here is to expand that to provide coverage for all the elementary schools. So there would be 11 behavioral health clinicians supported with these funds that would cover the elementary schools. And the model would be similar to the very successful model that we've had thus far in the middle and high schools. So it's just almost like a economies of scale type of thing there. And we would seek expansion of the funding that we currently use to support middle and high school to support sustainability of this initiative down the road after the ARPA funds are retired. I did speak with the superintendent, Commissioner Morgan. I know you had expressed concern, and they are not including this initiative in their however much dollars they're getting from ARPA funds. Their focus is really on the academic counselors who are addressing the interruption in learning and the consequences of that interruption in learning.
Isn't that behavioral simultaneously?
It is, sure. I mean, everything's behavioral, right? But this is addressing, the mental health, the substance use, the red flags that can lead to that or can be an indication of underlying mental health and substance use.
Dr. Brewster, your requests, which I'm not trying to say they're all good, would probably take about all the money we have.
It's 10.5 million.
So let's say.
Oh, I thought it was 22. Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, well,
11
that's
for
right,
this
that's
year.
right. 11 for this year.
Yeah, it's 10.5 over 2 years.
I'm getting it. Everybody else gave us priorities, 1 through 5, 1 through 10, 1 through 12, whatever. You gave us 1 through 2 and 1 through 2A. So every one of these is like.
So 2A, because it was on the category of behavioral health, but I would put 2A as a lesser priority than 2. Yeah, I put them in the order of priority as we were requested to do so.
Like your priorities are 1 and 2, there's nothing.
They are the biggest priorities, correct.
So you can't do without these.
I mean, our community has a big need, as we've outlined, and I think the idea here is of recovery, and as we're recovering from this pandemic and mitigating the impact of this pandemic, I think it's important for us to consider the benefit of this type of infrastructure, this behavioral health infrastructure.
I guess it just is a difference in priority order than everybody else. It just struck me. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Now, as we're building these healthcare clinics, the behavioral is being included into this, right? As part of the 2 schools you just built the clinics in?
So the 2 schools will have a behavioral health clinician that's supported by the grant funds, the $650,000 grant funds.
Another question, I'm bringing this from, I just visited Caroline County, over the Eastern Shore. Of course, they have no hospital in Caroline County.
Yeah.
But each of those schools has one of these healthcare systems.
School-based health system.
And what it is, what's impressed me was they have an outside door for regular citizens to go in. And they isolate it at first. They're not part of the school. The school kids come in the other door from the school because they're not allowed to go into the school because of safety. And the impressive thing I had about this is they separate the person coming through that side door into an isolated area. If they haven't got any kind of, you might say, hazardous disease or whatever to spread to the community, then they get into the regular clinic and get treated, or they're sent to a hospital if necessary. But every school there, you have 8 of them that they're all the schools have one of these involved. And I was very impressed over that. And they're overseen by a physician assistant mainly and some nurses. And it seemed to be working very well for them, but they don't have a hospital. They got to send them to Delaware or another county south of them for hospital treatment.
Yeah, and we're in a great place. We have 2 new school-based health centers that we're launching
and we
in the
got that
fall,
already here, and I'm impressed
really
with that.
excited about that.
I just want to make sure we keep it separated from the kids. I think it's great that a kid can go over to your health care and get treated to a point and not have to be sent home where parents call to come
Exactly,
up.
and staff as well.
And if they're not that bad, then go back to school.
Exactly.
And I 100% support that.
Minimizing the disruption in their education.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Minimize their, and plus take the parents out of work and whatever to come get them.
Exactly.
Things
And
like
as
that.
I've talked about before, when we talked about the 2 school-based health centers, which is separate from anything I'm proposing here today.
I understand. You're in a-
But as
yeah,
I
right.
talked about before, when we talked about the school-based health centers, I mean, our ultimate vision for those school-based health centers is to expand access to the community around them so that they become a primary care access point
That's
for
what
that
I want to
whole
make sure we're
community.
doing, especially as we get into the further out southern part of the county.
We're
northern
working on
part of
that.
the county. Those things need to be addressed.
Those things are in motion.
And they both of us have some kind of health insurance or Medicare, Medicaid, whatever, and that can be used to of course fund all this. I understand that, but I want to make sure we build these so we understand we're going to protect these kids in school, and as well as the citizens are coming in out of the street there, whatever, to visit, not out of the street, but coming in to visit these. But you're got reasonable, but there's quite a bit of money involved here. We don't have much to spend.
Quite a bit of need.
And to make sure we looking at capital improvements is a big thing.
Yeah, the need, like I said, the need has ripple effects throughout our whole community, as we
Right
talked
now,
about
the
earlier.
next few years, you're right.
Right. I mean, there's ripple effects from this pandemic, but there was always underlying behavioral health
I agree.
crisis issues.
I
I mean,
agree.
we talked about the opioid epidemic, and then we talked alongside that the outstanding mental health demands and needs that we have that essentially are fueling so many of the other negative consequences in our community. You know, we talked about violence, and
Sure.
not all violence is related to mental health. I will definitely be clear about that.
Yeah.
But when we look at trauma and we look at mental health and substance use that's uncontrolled, that's when we start to see things like crime.
And that's why we spend a lot of money into our correctional center to make sure that we realize these people are not going to stay in jail forever, and they're going to be released back into the community.
Right, and
So
then you get
whatever-
into the cycle of
whatever intervention we
recidivism.
can do to help them transition back and be productive, I'm 100% for.
Sure, yeah.
That's
And
what I'm for.
that's what this behavioral health stabilization facility would really help to emphasize. And again, you know, we're breaking the cycle of recidivism because we are truly addressing what are the underlying reasons for people getting into these situations.
Exactly. Try to break that cycle. I agree.
As you look at your work capacity building, it seems like the health department is becoming the overall umbrella of capacity building to supplement school programs, to work with the sheriff, et cetera. How many contractual people, when we get done going through all this, are we really talking about?
Yeah. So the number of contractual people for the first element, the crisis the response, the surge operations, we're looking at about 50 people this fiscal year. And again, we went from about 150 to 50 this fiscal year and about 30 or so the fiscal year 23. The next component is the field unit, the behavioral health crisis field unit. And for that, we're talking about 8 contractual individuals. And that would include people from the sheriff's office as well as the health department mental health clinicians. The next, in terms of the behavioral health hub, that stabilization and receiving facility, which is a critical element of this service, would be 21 contractual FTE. Because again, we're covering 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. So we're not going to have 21 people in the building at one time, but we need to be able to cover those shifts and have backup for weekend coverage. And if we're starting to talk about on-call coverage as well, we'll have to consider that down the road as well.
109 altogether.
For surge response, yeah. And some of those we already have. We're maintaining for fiscal year 22 and 23.
So you've gone from 150 to 50 for 2022.
Yeah, it's about 50. I think it's 48 or 47.
Yeah, about that, yeah. And you're looking at a lot of these, though, actually being funded by insurance, et cetera. and some of
Yeah,
them
so the surge
Not all of
staff, we don't anticipate I mean, once we're done with COVID operations, we're not going to keep doing, the kind of
Testing and whatever,
operations that we have currently, right? Vaccine, testing, contact tracing, all of that stuff. I mean, those will incorporate back into our normal activities to the level that they would be at that point in time. So there's the plan to step away from that. Those aren't going to become FTE requests for the county. The piece about the field unit and the
That's the
piece about
21
the
FTE you
crisis
talked about.
stabilization center, that's where we are trying to build capacity so we can bill for what we can bill, and so that we can get those grants that we've missed out on because we haven't had a baseline capacity established in our county.
Any other questions, Commissioner?
No, thank
Anybody?
you very much.
Thank you very much. Nothing else, Brian. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, Commissioners, that is the conclusion, and if you want to provide feedback, we'll be coming back next Tuesday to seek direction.
So, Ms. Cudmore, one of the challenges I think I'll be content to push to you is once we whittle down the list to the 22.5 million,
Right.
the balance between the 2 years is going to
We'll
be a
have
little
to-
tricky.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's
Because
what I
it looks
need.
to be pretty front-loaded for the
It
first
is,
year.
it is. And what we'll have to do is there may be some projects that may have to be funded
To
over 2
next year.
years.
About 2
So
years.
we'll have to just make the 211s work for the 2 years.
Okay.
And like Dr. Brewster and a lot of hers, she actually put the 2 fiscal years, which will help
Okay.
on her funding.
Okay.
So if we can receive any direction ahead of time, we can, update the spreadsheet and then come back next Tuesday with your direction. Or if not, we'll be back next Tuesday and we'll bring a spreadsheet to where we can actually maybe put the numbers in so we can try to balance and get this done.
Okay. Any more questions, Commissioners? Ms. Cudmore, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
That concludes County Administrator time.
Ooh. Wow, daggone. Okay, we'll go right into Commissioners' time. We're going to start with...
Sir, no, you
Board
do
of Health?
have Board of Health, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry, Board of Health. I'm sorry.
Dr. Brewster's been up for a while.
Oh, my
Should
gosh.
we take a
I thought she was all done.
break?
Be nice to take a little break.
Okay, I need a motion.
Where's the motion? Yeah.
Move to adjourn as the St. Mary's, Commissioners of St. Mary's County, and reconvene as the St. Mary's County Board of Health.
Second.
First, second, all in favor? Aye. Dr. Brewster, you're on again.
Good afternoon now. Thank you again, Commissioners. Today's update, again, will focus on COVID-19. It's been about almost a month since we last met. And we'll go over to, as normal, I'll touch on the data on our data webpage. Thank you, Ms. Casas. So as we've definitely been enjoying a slowed down pace of new cases over the past several weeks, and these numbers, as you see, are where we're sitting at currently. If you keep scrolling down, we're continuing to monitor all the breakthrough cases. Breakthrough cases, again, are individuals who've tested positive for COVID-19 after they've been fully vaccinated. We scroll down here, right here, and we've pretty much been around the same area. We have noticed over the past few weeks a slight uptick, but that's not statistically significant. We'll continue to monitor that. We have noticed an uptick in cases around the country and hospitalizations around the country, largely due to the Delta variant, which I'll talk about in a moment, and also hospitalizations and cases in unvaccinated people. Go down. This is where we're tracking our variants of concern. We announced recently that we did identify the first identified Delta variant case in St. Mary's County resident. And again, we're not doing genomic analysis on every positive case of COVID-19 in the county, so this may be an under-reflection. But we hope to, moving forward, increase our genomics analysis so we can better track the emergence of Delta virus variant here in the county. Go down further. Our new case rates have pretty much, if you scroll over, have stayed fairly stable over the past, since we last met, fairly low and fairly stable. We're, of course, monitoring that as well as the changes in the age groups in the graph below this pretty closely as well. If you keep scrolling down, our COVID-related fatalities, if you keep going down to that section, further down. Thank you. COVID-related fatalities have remained at 132 St. Mary's County residents who've passed in a COVID-related death. We are, of course, continuing to monitor all of that and hopefully can avert future fatalities as we continue to encourage people to get vaccinated. Just scrolling down. And further down. So vaccines. We have made incremental improvements in the numbers since over the past handful of weeks. I'll talk about in a moment some updates from the vaccine front, but if you scroll down, I can show you the percentages across different age groups. So if you look at, these are the percentages of those age groups who have been, in this chart, it's receiving their first dose. So of our total population, including those people who are not yet age eligible for vaccine, about 53% of our total population has received their first dose. If you go to final dose, it's just shy of 50%. And if you look at the age eligible, the 12 and older population in that second column, it's about 63%. When we look at the race-ethnic distribution, it's fairly parallels the race-ethnic distribution of our whole population, with approximately, I think it's probably about 14.6% of residents who've received one dose who identify as African American. And then his residents who identify as Hispanic who've received one dose, I think it's about 3.6%, somewhere around there. Okay. If you go back to the slide set, I did want to introduce the topic of Delta variant. We did put out a press release recently about that when we identified our first St. Mary's case. We have been following this very closely worldwide. It's very concerning. It does appear to be more contagious with a higher attack rate than some of the other COVID virus variants. Fortunately, the vaccines we have, in particular the mRNA vaccines, seem to be very effective against the Delta variant. However, it has now become the dominant strain in the U.S., largely because of those who are unvaccinated, including those who are not yet age eligible to be vaccinated, getting Delta variant, and because of its contagiousness or attack rate is greater. We have seen a greater impact of severe illness in young people, young adults and youth than what we saw with prior COVID variants. This is, of course, really concerning because everybody less than 12 have not yet been vaccinated. And also because we see fairly low rates of vaccination uptake in our 12 to 17-year-olds and our young adults. So there's still a lot of unvaccinated people in that youth, young adult, those groups that will be susceptible to this Delta variant. We also are seeing a slightly different symptom profile. I mean, they may have the same general symptoms of COVID that we've been talking about the whole time, but we've seen a slight predominance of headache, runny nose, sore throat, and fever with this Delta variant. So it may not just be allergies. If people are having a runny nose and they're unvaccinated in particular, we definitely encourage them to consider getting tested. If you go to the, just to explain the graph here, as I had put it on there, I didn't really talk about it. That dark orange is the emergence of the Delta variant as it's been identified through genomic analysis across the U.S. over the course of weeks. And you can see the exponential growth there and presence of that Delta variant, or in terms of the percentage of viral variants. Face coverings, we have, as you know, there's removal of the mask mandate statewide. However, face coverings are still recommended indoors for people who are unvaccinated, especially, or people who are not fully vaccinated. And again, fully vaccinated is 2 weeks after your second dose for a 2-dose vaccine, or 2 weeks after your first dose for a single-dose vaccine series. And especially in indoor congregate settings, the use of face covering is going to be really important when there are, in particular, large numbers of unvaccinated people, such as children. Next is COVID-19 testing. We have updated for the summer our testing hours. We've extended into evening hours, but we've eliminated for now use of the school-based health centers for testing purposes. We'll restart that in the fall when schools open up. Leonardtown and Lexington Park both are open from 8 to 6 p.m. Monday through Thursday, as well as 8 to 3:30 p.m. on Fridays. The reason why we cut it short on Fridays is we have to make the courier that takes it to the lab. Otherwise, the sample sits there until the following week, and we can't have that. We are also offering rapid PCR testing, much more reliable than rapid antigen testing. That rapid PCR testing is available when people call ahead at the Leonardtown location. Some updates on the vaccine front. As you may have heard, we've sunsetted temporarily use of the Hollywood Volunteer Fire Department for those mass vaccine clinics. We're taking a break from there for a while as we've seen decreased numbers. We'll pick that up back again if we need to, as we see the less than 12 become eligible for vaccine, and as we start to get guidance on when booster doses would be recommended, which I'll talk about in a moment. Where to go? Today, we're operating our first regular clinic out of the Leonardtown Health Department office. And we hope that as the PNC renovation progresses along in terms of the drive-through, that we can start using that for our Lexington Park Great Mills community, especially because many individuals who live in that community may not have access to cars and so forth to get to other places. Boosters, lots of questions about that, lots developing, some conversations in the news about that. Thus far, we don't have recommendations for booster doses. I know some people are approaching, being 8 months or 7 months, 8 months after having received their vaccine. And so there is the question of waning immunity. There is a question of escape variants that are resistant to these vaccines emerging. Other countries, including France, Israel, UK, are starting to do booster doses or have started to do booster doses for certain populations, like the immunocompromised, older individuals. I think will be starting in the UK soon. And so we are, again, just watching this very, very closely, and the data is being tracked very closely at the national level as well, to pick up and to figure out when booster doses may be recommended for us here. We're continuing to get mobile with our vaccine effort and encourage any groups in the community who are ready for us to come on site. If they are ready for us to come on site to provide vaccine, we'll be happy to do so. They just need to call that number or email us, and we'll get that scheduled. And next, the appointments currently are available. And again, today we're operating out of the Leonardtown Health Department office for vaccine. Lastly, I just wanted to update you. I know it's not really directly COVID related, except there is an element of COVID that was addressed and identified in the local health improvement process. As you remember, we steer a local health improvement process in collaboration with all the partners through our community that we brought together through the Healthy St. Mary's Partnership. And the idea of this local health improvement process is to identify the health priorities for our communities for a period of 6 years in this case, and then to strategize and look at the evidence and look at what's feasible and to look at what resources we currently have in our community that we could leverage and implement objectives and strategies for achieving improvement in health, in those health priority areas. A very comprehensive community health assessment was conducted that included surveys, focus groups, key informant interviews, looked at quantitative data, so forth. That was released in December. In that process, there were 4 key health priorities identified as listed here. Each of these 4 key health priority areas now correspond to an action team in the coalition. Membership is free and open to any resident and community organization that wants to take part in this, and they can go to healthystmarys.com to sign up. Our Community Health Improvement Plan, which I believe I'd communicated a draft to you all, commissioners, a little while ago, has now been formally released. It is a living document. We will update it annually with feedback and data, but the current version has been released and is a result of all the strategic planning that many, many partners have done to develop a roadmap for improved health for our county. And that's it. All of that's available on that website, healthystmarys.com.
Good. Any questions, commissioners?
No?
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, sirs.
Thank you very much. Very good. Thank you. Thank you for all you've done for the community. Believe me.
All right, I move to adjourn as the St. Mary's County Board of Health and reconvene as the Commissioners of St. Mary's County.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. So be it. Now I'm going to Commissioner's time, right?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Hewitt, we're going to start with you today.
All right, well, thank you. Today, we voted on additional voting locations. And I'm not opposed to early voting. I think it's a great idea. I think what we've done is we've allowed more people to become involved in the voting process. And honestly, we've heard about disenfranchisement of voters in specifically the Lexington Park area, and I think it's very important we have one there. I voted against the third location, not because I'm against a third location, but we've only had one. Now we're going to 3. I would like to see how it worked with 2. I was a little surprised that we've already have a lease with a location through 2028. Seems like it kind of hindered our ability to look at the best bang for the buck. But it all gets to be about what's nice to have and what we need. We have absentee voting. We have, they're going to be mailing everybody the ability to get an absentee ballot. We have those drop-off places, the boxes that you can drop your absentee ballot in. Plus, we have the day of voting day. It just seems like we have quite a bit. And I just think to spend an additional $200,000, I just wish we would rather done 2 instead of 3. But it is what it is, and we go with the majority decision. Secondly, we all like to know in the future when we made decisions in the past to say, look, if I'd have known that then, I may have made a different decision. What I'm referring to is we did our budget back in April or early May. And the point is that during May and June, we got our revenues from the state, and they were higher than expected. That's good news. That's good news. We may, in fact, be somewhat Teflon protected from the events of COVID in that year of lockdown that we had and that slow economic activity we had going on. And if that's the case, that's good news. It makes this commissioner feel better about what we had to do for EMS. That I fully support hiring all the contractual, or let's call them career people there. And look, whatever we have to do to get ambulances to people in the least amount of time, it's a good idea. But hopefully these revenues will continue. I still believe there'll be a day of reckoning with what the COVID impact was on us economically. I think we'll still have some kind of reckoning once the stimulus money goes away. But hey, maybe it won't be as bad, and maybe we're more resilient than we think. Tonight, public forum. Excellent opportunity. This is an open mic. Come up with whatever you think you have in mind. We want to hear from you. Please take the opportunity to do that. Lastly, it's been hot. Keep an eye on your pets, other people who may not have air conditioning. hopefully everybody does. But just kind of keep an eye on your community and help out where you can, and stay hydrated and try not to do too much in this heat. Thank you.
Eric, you got
Very
it.
good. Well, it's been a busy morning. We've done a lot. We've talked about a lot of stuff. We've got some decisions to make next week, but that's good. One of the things we did this morning, like we do every morning, is we approved the consent agenda. And it sometimes slips under the radar a little bit, but we have consent letters on the consent agenda. And they're usually things that are relatively simple that we all agree on, that are supporting something. It's not necessarily a decision we're making. But we had 2 letters attached to the consent agenda this morning that are very important and very important to our community. First, we had a letter of support to the Maryland Department of Transportation to encourage a dedication of a section of Route 5 in honor of Sheriff Joe Lee Somerville. It's a good thing. We, as a commissioner board, support that, and we hope that the state can move forward with that and make it happen. Second, we had a letter of support to our congressional delegation, to Congressman Hoyer, to Senators Cardin and Van Hollen, asking them to appeal and take a look at the FHA loan limits. And it's a really complicated issue, or it's made overly complicated, but basically, if you go to buy a house in Calvert or Charles County, your loan is cheaper than if you buy a house in St. Mary's County if your house costs a certain amount. And we can fix that. Well, the federal government can fix that. We can't fix it locally. And so we signed on to a letter as the Board of Commissioners, along with the Southern Maryland Association of Realtors, along with the NAACP, along with our state delegation. We are all in this together, and it would be a good move for St. Mary's County. So I just want people to be aware of this, and I think it would be good for everyone. Over the weekend, I was honored and fortunate to be at the Habitat for Humanity ribbon cutting for their newest house in Lexington Park. Thank you to our community as a whole, to all the volunteers who put in a lot of hours to make this build possible, to our business partners that were involved with it that made this possible, especially WM Davis and their company. They did a lot of work to make this house possible, and it's a great thing. Congratulations to the new homeowners. Habitat for Humanity is a wonderful organization. If you're looking for an organization to support, they're a great one to support. Finally, I just want to echo the comments. We have a public hearing tonight on some LoSAP proposals and a public forum tonight, 6:30, 6:45. Everyone is welcome to participate. We hope to hear from you. Thank you.
John, you got her next.
So I had a chance to attend the Golden Beach 4th of July Independence Day Parade. Let me tell you, it was great to actually be at an event in person, shaking hands, saying hello, seeing everybody, and it's the largest parade that they had they said in history. So, I don't mess with the mayor of Golden Beach. If that's what Mr. Antosh says, Mayor Antosh, then so be it. But no, it was a great event. It really was, seeing everybody out there, the golf carts and four-wheelers and fire department, EMS. I mean, it really shows that St. Mary's County is resilient, and that regardless of what's going on, they're going to be out there, and that everybody was really ready to just get back into the swing of things after the pandemic, and timing was perfect for that event. It is getting significantly hot out. The more humid days, be careful out there. Make sure you're drinking water. If you need a cooling center, find a cooling center. For those of us that have our parents here, make sure that you're checking on your parents and your neighbors, and ensuring that they're not suffering from the heat. And of course, if you need your heating and air conditioning fixed, make sure you go local. I mean, that's always the way to do it. But no, thank you very much.
Couple things. On Sunday, Leonardtown opened up their butterfly trail, and a few of us attended. And it's kind of cool what they're doing up in Leonardtown. To take a look and you'll see all these little butterflies on the walls or on the light posts. And there's a little brochure you can pick up to follow around and find different butterflies and go to the different stores and boutiques to promote the various businesses in Leonardtown. And simultaneously, they're building a butterfly trail or an alley trail. And if you stop sort of where Duke's used to be, you can walk down there and see the idea they're coming up with to make the alleyways of Leonardtown more accessible. And nice, cool things to go look at. So if they get a chance to look at that. But the big thing, I think, over the weekend was a jazz festival. It was a 3-day event versus a 1-day event. Started out on Friday night in Leonardtown at the Fenwick Inn and some other places, and until it started pouring down rain, everybody was having a real good time. Saturday, as usual, the 21st annual Potomac River Jazz and Seafood Festival. Had 300 and some people, and this year was much smaller because of the COVID and 50% restriction, and what the board decided to do was to cut the attendance in half. They had 2 performers who did a great job. But the most important thing is that thing sold out in 4 hours. And ironically, most of the people who attend that event come from out of the county. So it was a great opportunity to tie this weekend together with the event Friday night in Leonardtown using the new hotel. They have a trolley bus that carted people around. You had the Potomac Jazz Festival on Saturday. And then on Sunday night, they had a couple of boat cruises with Captain Phil Langley that took you out of Breton Bay, down the mouth of Potomac River, around St. Clements Island, and came back. But I think the person that really needs a lot of recognition for this is Win Briscoe. Win is the jazz ambassador of St. Mary's County. And Win was at every event the entire time as a volunteer. Win has some outfits, ladies and gentlemen. I think she changed her outfit 10 times over those days. So I think she gives a lot of credit to her mother for having an expansive wardrobe down there, but she looked beautiful at every event. She was such a gracious hostess for everybody. So if you see Win Briscoe, you tell her thank you for everything she did for the Jazz Festival. And with that, stay cool. Thank you.
And another thing about Win Briscoe, she's actually from the southern part of the county. She's a ridge gal. So, I mean, and she's done well in her life. And
Win Road's named after her.
Win Road. So, yeah, maybe, I won't say that, but it could be. But what she did even at the, I think the day we were there, the Saturday night, I think she changed 3 times while we were there to different, and beautiful dresses she had on and everything. And she was a great sponsor, gave a good talk. But the Jazz Festival was very successful, I think, this year, except for the cut down. I got to admit, there was only 2 performers there this time, and down to 312 total. Did very good, did very well. And also this week, too, I'm going to go to a dedication of a new electric car charging station. You know, we have a car manufacturer who is actually going to install 8 charging stations in St. Mary's County alone. Tesla. And so they must think that's going to be an important push here. And we also have almost 8 charging places, I think, with Smedco is going to put in, mainly the government facilities. They've already put one at Leonardtown Library already, and they're expanding this. So I assume that they feel that with that number in little old St. Mary's County, it must be a big thing happening to us with the electric cars. They're going to be becoming more and more involved. So to let you know that for those who are interested in a charging station, my wife has talked about it because we have a hybrid type of car, the Prius, which doesn't really do electric charging, but right now it gets about 60 miles to a gallon with what it does now. So the evolution of better batteries, things like that, I do believe it's truly going to be a wave of the future. You're going to have electric cars that go 300 or 400 miles from one charge. So that's going to happen. And also, I'm really looking at just seeing what Caroline County has done with their health services, and especially in their schools and everything. And I think we're a little bit behind on it, and I look forward to working more with the health department on evolving this, especially around our schools particularly. But it provides the citizens as well as schools, especially in the counties, part of the counties that are not well serviced by medical staff, such as southern part and some of the northern part too. So this is a good thing for all of us. I think that's all I have today. We now are ready to go in. I need a motion to go into closed session.
I have a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of discussions, boards and commissions, and litigation.
Second.
First, second, all in favor? Aye.